U.S. has attacked Iran by financing proxies like MEK and Baluchistani terrorists prior to that. And I would include the brutal sanctions and asset freezers as attacks on Iran's economy as well. And they financed these AstroTurf protesters who they were arming, who were going around attacking police stations and setting mosques and subways on fire. So those are all attacks on Iran too, and we've been covering that as well.
Now, I want to go through some of the reports that have been coming out today. The first thing is, let's go work backwards. We just had a report that Saudi Arabia conducted an attack on Iran during the war. What's your thoughts on that? What's your view?
Yeah, they're asking for it. They did so very a la Israel US style because Saudi Arabia said, oh, don't worry, they can't use our airspace or any of these bases. And then they did. And of course, some of the most damaging strikes Iran did was on the Prince Sultan Air Base, where they hit the refuelers and a very expensive AWACS plane, an early warning system. And it was smacked, and there's video evidence of this, satellite evidence of this in Saudi Arabia. So whatever they say, it doesn't matter. They lie. They absolutely have been used as a staging ground. And in fact, it seems like they participated in attacks themselves, which means they will not be safe should there be retaliatory strikes in what you call the hot war. I mean, this kind of is a hot war on the sea anyway. But yeah, Saudi Arabia and the UAE in particular are they're in the target list for sure.
And so now that's the first bit. Obviously, they're going to be targets, but now since Saudi Arabia was partaking in the attack, we know the UAE was, we know Kuwait was. It seems like all of these nations that made it seem like they were not part of the attack were quite clearly part of it, right?
Yeah, well, of course they're going to lie. And Iran had basically limited their counterstrikes to the U.S. bases on those countries you listed, with the exception of hitting some spooks in the hotels in UAE. That's still, U.S. staging ground. But these people do nothing but lie. These are the same states that sponsored ISIS in Syria. The UAE is who sponsors Hamedi's gang, the RSF in Sudan, in that civil war. They're absolutely heartless, and they'll, parade around the Bitcoin bros and OnlyFans girls, but they do a lot worse than that kind of degeneracy. They've been sponsoring terrorism globally. Essentially, everything America has accused Iran of doing, the UAE actually does. Saudi Arabia actually does. Saudi Arabia and Israel had a hot roll in September 11th, and that would have not been possible without them. Little Bandar Bush and co. should be answering some questions about that. Not to, I don't want to open another huge can of worms, but these are our greatest allies. Okay, these people helped orchestrate Al Qaeda, then Al Qaeda in Libya, Al Qaeda in Syria, and they've been sponsoring terrorist groups inside Iran. These 40,000 protesters killed, that's a myth. That's like the 40 beheaded babies myth. But there were some protests and there were people killed, but a lot of it was AstroTurf. They came in across the border, got caught by both Turkish and Iranian intelligence, and we know who was arming these Kurdish factions. It's the same cadres every time. Every time. And why is the U.S. and Israel and the Gulf states there, why are they allowed to openly finance and arm terrorists across the globe? The U.S. did the same thing in Chechnya twice. I mean, it's ongoing. And yet they say Iran's the state purveyor of terrorism. They're the greatest, blah, blah, blah. If you want to say the Houthis or Hezbollah are terrorist groups, even though Hezbollah was formed as a reaction to Israeli terrorism in Lebanon, bombing civilians and all the things they're doing now that they were doing in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, they've been doing this. Even then, you want to add up a death toll, Larry Johnson's gotten into this, it pales in compare to a single year of U.S. and Israeli terrorism. And that's planet-wide, really, especially with the Americans.
So Ryan, there are complaining that there's a bit of feedback coming from your mic. Are you able to? I don't know where it is, but there's a slight feedback.
I don't know.
Is it because maybe you got your speakers on a bit loud? I don't know where it is.
Maybe the speakers were loud. It's the same setup I always use.
Yeah, it's weird. Same here as well. But I just checked. I thought they were maybe chatting nonsense, but I quickly checked and it was a little bit. But anyway, it's fine. So because it's fine on my side, I think it's fine on your side. It's fine on the space, but it's just the.
Some of you need to hear me twice.
No, I don't. I don't. There's X. It's fine on X and it's fine on. I find on YouTube, but they're saying there's a little bit of reverb of the sound, and I checked and it is a little bit. But anyway, that's fine. I'll mute
Turn the
myself
speaker down.
when
I don't know what else to do.
I'll mute myself when you're speaking. Maybe that might. I'll trust if that's working. But just
It could be your speakers are loud.
sorry.
It could be your speakers are loud
It's
if it's my
possible.
voice.
It's possible.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm going to mute myself when you speak and see if that helps. So now the other question is coming back to it. We have the China trip, the China meeting. What do you think happens? There's a lot of like
You
BlackRock
gotta add
and a
the
lot of
R.
these.
China.
Got, so what do you think's gonna happen?
Go
What do you
ahead.
think's happening in the
Sorry.
China meeting, Ryan?
Well, you know, I can only base this on the previous meetings and how Trump behaves. Trump likes to go in with threats. He's basically Biff from Back to the Future. He's this buffoon making a bunch of threats he can't back up. And that's what he's done. You know, he wants rare earth, he wants trade deals, he wants cooperation on Iran. These people are so naive, and he said this more than one time, him and Hegseth, his liquor cabinet, that China should help the U.S. reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz is closed because you attacked Iran. It was already open before you attacked. The same thing with uranium. That was already on the table. You screwed that up by attacking them in the middle of the negotiations. And no, China does not have to take its navy or whatever and try and reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It's not happening. They're not restricting China's oil. They're just restricting the states that participated in the sanctions and asset grabbing and the war. And why not? That's reparations. You attacked them preemptively. So you're going to have to deal with this closure. And he's so divorced from reality that he actually thinks he can get China to assist him in some sort of armada to force the strait open. That's not happening. As far as the trade deals, it depends on how he behaves. If he behaves how he usually does, barking threats and about tariffs and whatever, that's not going to work. It's gonna fail. And China was standing up to the U.S. He tried to strong arm sanctions prior to this meeting, a meeting he already delayed once. And they just said, no, we're not going to do it. We're not putting sanctions on these companies. So he's going in with a stick and a stick. There's no carrot and stick, just a stick. And he doesn't understand, he doesn't have leverage. You need to do carrot for carrot. If you try to do carrot for stick, they're gonna, in the words of The Rock, they're gonna turn that stick sideways, shine it up real nice, like you know where it ends up, because they have no reason to listen to the U.S. on this. They got enough oil. They look, Iran is willing to work with those who are willing to work with them. It's the U.S. with their arm twisted by the Epstein class that insist on trying to choke Iran economically and strangle them, and they want to play footsie in the Strait of Hormuz, and he keeps trying to use force. All he has to do is leave. Get those ships, your little blockade on the blockade, go back to the Atlantic Ocean, and they will reopen the strait, and it'll probably have a toll booth because you're going to refuse to pay the reparations, so they're going to make the Gulf states pay by taxing all the ships that go in and out. And look, that's the consequence of losing a war.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah,
you're
it
on
is the
mute.
consequence of losing the war. Now, and it was from your side, I'm muting myself. But in terms of coming back to the what you're talking about, does China force Iran to make a deal?
No, I mean, China can't force Iran to make a deal either. They can maybe finesse the points Iran has already laid out. Because see, I think Iran and China have already talked about this. That's why those points are what they are. as far as moving uranium, both China and Russia or Russia has said, look, you can put it over here, and I don't think Iran's going to budge. If you want to actually see riots, then get rid of your uranium because they're public. I've talked to people in Tehran and other places in Iran, and they go out and celebrate. Even people who work 9 to 5 then go out on the street and celebrate their victory over the Zionist internationalists. They are so proud, so full of patriotism. And one of the key points that holds that together is you didn't give up on the uranium. Like, they were keeping that, and they need that as a deterrent because they talk about security guarantees. Well, it's just words. Like, security is based on power, not promises. And what gives them power is closing the strait and holding on to that uranium. Because it creates a question mark. Are we going to build a bomb or not? You don't know. And it's sort of what mitigates on Iran, is the fact that they don't know if Iran could spin that up and use a nuke back on Israel. So that uranium's not going anywhere. And it's like, it's not a matter of, well, they don't trust China, they don't trust Russia to hold it, or like they won't give it back, or whatever. It's like, no, that doesn't matter. This is on principle. We meaning Iran, already offered this. This was on the table, and you attacked us during that negotiation. So forget about it. You cannot say, "Oh, time out. Let's rewind." And you don't get a third chance. It's not even a second chance. So as far as that point goes, the Chinese cannot and will not anyway. But no one can get Iran to do anything with their uranium other than themselves, and they're keeping it. And I really don't think anybody can get them to reopen the strait without some sort of payment system, because millions of dollars of damage was done and thousands of people killed. There has to be some retribution for that. And I can tell you, if he tries to force it, if he starts firing on, let's say, Iranian oil tankers, then they will fire on U.S. bases in the Gulf again. And the tit for tat will not be even. The empire is going to suffer a lot more damage than Iran is. And if he wants to do his plan about trying to take over islands, whatever, that's all hot air. It won't work. If he wants to bomb infrastructure in Iran, he can do that, but a lot more damage will be coming the other way. They'll rebuild buildings. You're losing radar. You're losing bases forever. And these things take a long time to make again. The supply chains aren't there, and you need the Chinese to do that, by the way. So Trump just doesn't know. I don't think he understands the positions he's in. You can't just print some more interceptors or more standoff munitions. Those things are out, and they're out for a long time. It take you many years to recover what you used to have. So, yeah, like I said, he doesn't have any leverage.
What now looking at the overarching issue that we've really got is Trump is now saying the deal's off. And let's just look at the deal, and then we'll talk about him saying it's been off. So Iran is saying, look, there's 5 conditions you got to meet. You mentioned them, like sanctions relief. What's the other one? Unfreeze the assets, end the war, including Lebanon, give us complete control of the Strait of Hormuz, and I forget what the 5th one is. And so
get moved your presence from adjacent countries. No more U.S. bases.
So Iran saying, we're not going to even talk about the nuclear until you agree to that. Trump is saying, I only want to talk about the nuclear. Where do we kind of stand with all that?
Yeah, he says Iran is the one not doing the deal. There never was a deal. The pretense of a deal is just to get a timeout so they could gather standoff munitions from all over the world and restart the war. It's real clear. Israel wants a war, so the U.S. is going to do it. It doesn't matter. Like, all the economic pressure, all these billions of dollars from these Gulf states that definitely do not want this, all of his international partners, ally, Korea, Japan, everybody combined do not add up to the pressure of the Israeli lobby. This is the Epstein class. They got him over a barrel. He had Epstein murdered. I think everyone knows this now. They got blackmail. They got that leverage on him. Israel wants a war. They got a war. The same thing with Iraq with Bush. The same thing with Obama in Syria and Libya. This is what they want to do, and it's going to happen. There is no deal. This talk, like, well, blah, blah, blah. Whenever Iran says okay, then they go, oh, really? And then they up the bar and add new conditions. And if they go to that, oh, we'll allow the IAEA in. Okay, sure. They go, oh, well, then this. It's Charlie Brown kicking the football. They're not interested in a deal. They want a war, but they want a pretext. So they just keep adding new conditions to the deal until it gets to the point where Iran can't comply. And they go, you don't want a deal. It's your fault. Well, then we're going to have to keep these sanctions and this and this. And the real reason, no matter what Iran does, the U.S. is going to try to punish them economically and militarily because that's what Israel demands, because Iran resists Greater Israel's regional ambitions of ethnic cleansing and land annexation. That's the truth. That's the part they won't tell you. That's the part a lot of analysts won't tell you either. They talk about petrodollar and all this other stuff. Hey, there hasn't been any trade in any currency for what, almost 3 months? Did the dollar collapse? No, because it's not. That part of the equation isn't what matters. It's what they do with dollars later, which is buy U.S. bonds, which they can still do. They won't be able to do it for long without selling oil. It's so funny. The U.S. is even giving the UAE loans so that the UAE can then buy bonds. It's stupid. It's paying loan number one with loan number two type of thing. Total Ponzi scheme. But look, that isn't the reason there's a war. If you wanted people to stay on the dollar, then you simply don't attack them and don't sanction them. Iran was already on the dollar. So was Venezuela. So was Russia. The reason they're getting off is because of the war. So you sound like a fucking idiot when you say the U.S. is going to war to enforce the petrodollar. Like, the only reason people are getting off the dollar is because of the war. It's Israel. It's Israel. Quit blame shifting to other crap. It's the Israelis. The only reason the U.S. went to war with Iraq. Well, Saddam was getting off the petrodollar. Saddam was doing that after being invaded in the 90s and after the oil for food program was starving his people to death. And they were going to kill him and invade Iraq no matter what, because Scud missiles could reach Israel. He had fired them at Israel. That's why the whole Patriot system, Schwarzkopf did a commercial for it, in the first Gulf War. By the way, the no dollar nonsense then, there was no EU, there was no euro, so he wasn't switching over to that. It had nothing to do with it. This is Israel's plan, this is Greater Israel. You look at every single pre-war lie, for the first or second one, Office of Special Plans, they cherry-picked and fabricated information about weapons of mass destruction. This wasn't the oil companies doing this, by the way. It wasn't the weapons companies either. It was a bunch of neoconservative Jews in the Pentagon that turned up a war to go with Iraq and then a long occupation. Same thing with Syria. It was lying about Assad gassing his own people, It's because Syria was the land bridge between Iran and Hezbollah, and this is what Israel wanted. The Israelis are why we go to war. It's not the MIC. It's definitely not the petrodollar. Like, going to war is the exact opposite of that whole hypothesis. So I don't want to hear people say this BS anymore. We go to war for Israel. It's Zog. It's the Zionist occupation government.
So Ryan, but is there any chance that you're playing the X space in the background by any chance?
I've got nothing in the background.
No, it isn't you. Okay, just the chat's crying a lot. You see, they're just it's fine. So this is not. It's not.
I think somebody in chat's got some crap in the background on their own computer.
Yeah,
This is the same style interview we've done like 40 times.
Yeah, I know. I don't get it. You'll have to deal with it, guys. You'll have to deal with it. Hopefully, it's sort of a Professor Pape. If it's not, then it's definitely mine. Okay, so Ryan, another question I have for you is coming back to the and by the way, W Ryan, just tell him, look, listen, stop crying, deal with it. You're getting info.
It sounds fine here.
Exactly. Okay,
I
so
come in to do analysis, not tech stuff.
bro,
So
I don't know
get a
how to do
geek.
tech stuff myself. I'm the worst at it.
Yeah.
We need our own H1Bs, Ryan. We need our own
I tell you
H1Bs.
what, yeah, give me a geek because I'm not getting paid to do any of this stuff.
Exactly,
Like I lost
exactly,
money from doing this stuff.
exactly. So, okay, coming back to the a question at hand, we what is like, for example, what I mean by this is the thing that basically Trump's stuck in is this scenario, and you obviously we've got Pape coming on next. So obviously this will be put out as a separate video as well. He thinks that basically we're in an escalation trap, which is there's no way of getting out of this, and we're going to end up in a result where there is a ground invasion. Like, just from a logical sense, how does the U.S. get out of this situation?
What, like what they ought to do or what they will do?
Both.
There actually is a way out. You just leave. Same thing as Vietnam. Just pack up and go. So say like they can't get out, like yes you can. You take your boats, you sail away. It's not hard. It's just, is there a face saving way for egomaniac Trump? No. He could just say, well, look, we damaged them enough. We turned their uranium into dust, whatever, mission accomplished, and leave. But the Israelis aren't going to let him go. That's the problem. Even in the U.S. media they could lie and say, we won, haha, but it won't matter because the Israelis want him there. He's going to stay there. So he is in this little escalation trap. I like that phrase. He's playing chicken in the Strait of Hormuz. He's tried to send destroyers in there. They got shot at. They had to leave. The UE got tagged again in Fujairah. He doesn't have a way out. And, if he starts the war again, it'll actually go worse than the first time. Because this time you don't have interceptors. And you're very low on standoff munitions. So all that would happen is you're going to lose more stuff, and you're going to lose it more in Jordan and Saudi Arabia as well, not just Kuwait and Bahrain and a bit of Qatar and UAE. You're all getting smashed. And Israel's having a hard time with Hezbollah. They really don't want the tag team partner Iran coming in, doing the Frankensteiner to them. Like they don't want that. But they really think this is their last chance. And they're hoping the U.S. has enough firepower to take down Iran. But short of a ground invasion or a nuclear weapon, that's not going to happen. You cannot defeat a nation with the size and population of Iran with just an air force and special forces. That Rumsfeld doctrine is over. That will not work. So you would need a ground invasion or a nuke. The problem with that, it would take months just to get into the staging phase to get enough troops in adjacent areas to do an invasion of Iran. And you'd see it coming. You cannot do a buildup of that magnitude unnoticed. And they would be getting harassed the entire time. I don't think they would do a Normandy-style beach invasion in southern Iran. More than likely, it would come from above, down from Azerbaijan and hook over into Tehran. I say that because I've seen the Red Hat scenarios and what the U.S. plans are. But either way, you don't go across the Zagros Mountains, and you're not going to come from Iraq east. That's the worst plan. They'd come from the north down. There's still mountains there too. Whatever. None of it works. And the public doesn't want this war. And not for any kind of moral reason. Some people, are morally opposed, but it's the price of gasoline. Let's not kid ourselves. Nobody likes paying $3 to $4 at the pump. And a ground war, that's a global economic disaster. And I don't think China, Russia, or even Europeans, they're done with this. They're like, no, you're not going to do a ground invasion of Iran, America. Like, go back home, take your ball and go. And so it's actually more likely that they would be crazy enough to use nukes than it is their army, because then they don't stomach casualties themselves. But that is also an almost unfathomable scenario where you're going to have two nuclear powers using nuclear weapons on a country that doesn't have nukes and wasn't building nukes. But of the two, that's more likely. I think of the three things, those two or the U.S. leaving. U.S. leaving is still more probable than the other two. If we put up enough pressure. But if you allow it on autopilot, if you're one of these let's see what happens people, and you're not proactive, well, what's going to happen is they're going to obey Israel's demands and escalate the war. But if you are not one of these people and you're willing to put on enough pressure, they will find some excuse to say, okay, we'll do this and this. There is a way to negotiate still. Like, we haven't completely gone off the cliff yet. And, there would be a way to work with Pakistan and China and find some face-saving solution. It's just that the Israeli lobby is so loud and the other side is passive. The other side talks to each other, or they go and yell at buildings and like street protests. You need to do the adult thing. Dress up, go in and talk to Congress like an adult, the same way AIPAC does. This kind of feel-good theatrical activism, it doesn't work. You got to talk to your own representatives. We got people running. Like Dan Bilzerian's running against Randy Fine. That, running for Congress, it's very hard to beat an incumbent. But in doing so, you still move the needle. It gets all that discussion. It allows people to have a place to express their disgust with the current government. But lobbying is by far the most effective way. And you don't have to bribe lobby the way AIPAC does. You can lobby with numbers. They need to talk to adults, because all they're hearing is this Hezbollah Israeli propaganda. That's all they get all day. And we just don't have the organization and force for our own anti-AIPAC lobby to go in and say, knock it off in Iran, we don't need this. And the thing is, we got a bunch of smart guys. Like, we could send in Scott Horton, Max Blumenthal, but, there's a long list of people I'd like to talk to Congress on my behalf to say, go in there and do it. Couldn't we not organize a group enough to pay these people for their flights and hotels and get it done? Like, I'll do it. I'm not a good choice. I live very far away. That's expensive. Like, this is what needs to be done, is get in there and talk to the people that actually write the laws. Trump had to do this pause, by the way, because of the War Powers Act. He needs to say, okay, that war is done. This is the new one. So I get another 90 days to mess around. It's just like finessing a loophole, which is typical of that Yankee egomaniac. So we have the chance right now to avoid a greater war. Now, I know some of you are probably like, nah, let them do it, because you enjoy watching the UAE and Israel burn. So do I. But at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to die, and gas is not going down. And it's more than that. It's fertilizer, it's essential gases for semiconductors, and down the line. You're going to have forced austerity because of Israel's war. Your standard of living will drop because of these imperial escapades that are going to fail. There is, even if they did a ground invasion, that's not even a guarantee that they'd win. It's, the odds favor America in that, but not well. Not very well. And then imagine if you do that, and as soon as you start staging for a ground invasion and the Houthis close the Red Sea, then what? I mean, just don't do it. And we need, for lack of better words, our side to lobby. That's what we need. And I just don't see that. If I lived over, I used to do it. I got beach nourishment from North Carolina. How? I went in and talked to them. I don't understand these people like Occupy Wall Street, for example. They were out in Washington, D.C. for months, hitting bongos and holding signs. What are you doing? Go in the building and talk to them. It's not illegal. You do have representative government. It took a lot to get to that point, and they don't utilize it. It's so frustrating. Like, if you live in America, especially if you live in like Virginia or Maryland, take a week, to trip and go and get it done. If we don't do this, if we just yell on YouTube and X about how stupid the government is, okay. But like if that whole purpose of doing that is to activate change, to go in and talk to the lawmakers who have the power of the purse, by the way, I don't think this $29 billion price tag is accurate. That's what they're saying. It's more than that. But now we know it's at least that. You got to go in and say, we don't want this. It costs too much. Gas prices are too high. Iran's not a threat to the United States. We know this is about Israel. You got to fight back against the APAC class. And it's not going to happen by, yelling in circles. I got a list of people I'd like to lobby. Is there some way to do a fundraiser? No, because they'll shut it down. I'm not allowed on GoFundMe. I'm not allowed on PayPal. I'm not allowed on Patreon. I'm not allowed on YouTube. I could raise the money myself if I was just on normal things. But it was something that we need. We need an anti-APAC. We need a real anti-APAC lobbyist goes in and says, no, knock it off of this Zionist, religious, weird, God-ordained real estate agent for the special race and all that stuff. We're not going to war for Israel.
Well, there is an anti-APAC. There's AZAPAC. They're an example of people who are trying to create
But it's in name only. All they do is bitch online. Like, you have to actually go physically lobby. That's what I want to get done.
Yeah.
I haven't seen them do that. I haven't seen them go to DC and lobby even once.
Yeah, I don't think they've done that because the operation is quite new. But what they have been doing is they've not just been online. I know they've.
There's CNI with Phil Giraldi and stuff, and he has done, but no one knows. You need to build that up maybe, but.
Well, they're quite new.
Maybe I'll do it. I don't know. We got gifts and go. Look, here's the people. I'm just going to pick some people, and we're not going to vote on this. These are some good people. I'm going to ask them. And if no one will do it, I'll do it. But I really don't want to do it. But I think other people will do it. If they don't, I'm the backup plan. We got to get in there and talk to these people. And you can go to your state government, too, if you live very far away from D.C., even if you're in North Carolina, you can go to Raleigh, whatever. You can talk to them. It will make an impact. You got to say, look, the people from my state have died in this war. People from here, you can do this. This is how the system works. The system does not work by putting memes on Facebook or whatever. You gotta, all these great arguments you have, and you see, you got Pape on, you got Larry Johnson on today, right? Larry Johnson's in his 70s. He doesn't need to be doing the lobbying too, but you got all this info. We got some young guys too, and I'm not age bashing or anything, but I'm just saying, you don't have to send someone from Florida to DC. There are people in DC anyway that live there that could do this. It is something
Well, let's be clear on this. What it is what you need, and unfortunately no one is doing this whatsoever, is you need to create basically different branches in different towns. People head them up, and then they would have a situation where they would need to then lobby, they would need to push things. But something like that, of course, it takes time, but it takes effort. And unfortunately, we haven't got anyone who is politically minded enough to be able to do something like that. And the problem is, because someone like AZAPAC, who I respect a lot, I respect Dr. Michael, I know you may disagree, but
hat tip to them. It's just you guys.
But the thing is,
pick somebody
because they're starting new,
people represent you, and go lobby.
So because they're quite new, what they've maybe done is made a few errors. So, for example, in my view, I think they were so desperate for Randy Fine to lose, they did endorse Aaron Baker, and Aaron Baker had a number of problematic political positions even before, right? So that's an example of
Israel's our greatest ally.
That's an example of it. Or the other example
right there.
Or the other example is in January. Do you remember the Iranian protest? He was supporting. So he was supporting the protest, and he was like, "Free Iran." So, of course, this guy isn't politically aware. Now, what you need is not just endorsing political candidates. You need to do that, but you need to build an infrastructure in a large number of towns that is politically aware and lobbies, but more than that, that they don't have a scenario. Because my biggest concern with a lot of these political candidates. Other than Anthony Aguilar, I think he's done it quite well, where he's kind of kept it neutral. He's not left wing or right wing. I think candidates just become too far left or too far right, and then other people don't really want to work with them. And it's just being smart enough to make sure you don't fall into that quagmire. So that's one element. The second element is to create all these different branches. Again, I don't see anyone doing that. And then there's the third one is when you go for this move, you put around you people who are politically aware, who can navigate the situation. And I think a lot of this is shock jock style of doing things just doesn't work in the political sphere.
Yeah.
So I think those
that's
are
not
the
real
different
life.
elements.
Yeah. You need like okay, so there's two sort of weapons. One is supporting candidates to run for office who aren't taking AIPAC and UDP and all the other Israel Friends type of organizations money. That's one side. The other side is lobbying about policy with the people who are already there. There are a lot of people in Congress that just sort of vote with their party because they don't know what's going on. You got to be able to reach these people and talk to them and show we don't want a war with Iran. No, that won't work because X, Y, and Z. They tell them the truth. The stuff I said at the beginning of the show about interceptors, standoff munition, red hat scenarios, war games, like they don't know these things. We all assume, oh, they're in Congress. They don't. They really don't. It's kind of sad. And they need to be educated on that. And the way to do that, it's free. Other than the transportation and staying, somewhere in DC or outside of DC, you are allowed to make a meeting, schedule it, and talk to a legislative assistant. You probably won't get to talk to the congressman at first, but they learn everything from their LAs anyway. And you go in and you give them your case. And our side is not doing that. And like we don't have time to wait for the next election. Like they could start this war in Iran this summer. So, or sooner. And it's not just that. We're going to need it for the future. There's always going to be something. And what you see, the power of Israel is the Israeli lobby. And there's no Palestine lobby. There's no Yemen lobby. There's no Sudan lobby, not of any, strength. But it should just be an anti-war lobby. It needs to be people who know what's going on, that can go in and explain the fall of these policies, how it's going to add to the national debt, how it doesn't further American interests. Like that's the actual America first, right? Not making racist jokes online and being an ass clown. Like that's such a waste of time and energy. It's such a flame war, and it's just so stupid that I don't want none of it. Like, just come on. We got to have some adults. The solution is clear. I just laid it out. This is what we need. We do have people supporting candidate. I'm all for Thomas Massey. He needs to be reelected 1,000%. But it's not like A or B. In addition to that, we'd have to have our side in DC talking to representatives or their assistants about these issues. That should be, and it wouldn't cost that much. But the problem is censorship. It's very hard to organize a fundraise when you're not allowed to use any of the payment processors or social media. So it ain't going to be me. But most of you are not banned on everything. So there's no excuse. You can reach everyone. It's be so easy. If I was allowed on this is why I'm not allowed. If I was allowed on these things, I could do this myself. I could raise the money and I would go and I'd talk to them myself.
Well, you can still do that, but you just use a proxy account, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just harder. It's harder to reach people. We do have Give Singo, and we have Twitter. I'm nerfed on Twitter though, but
we all are.
I'm not the best person to do this anyway. Like there are people. I would love to get a team, get Finkelstein, get Kasparian, get people like they do so well when they're talking. Like, go take these people and put them in DC and let the representatives hear that, 'cause they're not watching all these videos and stuff.
Well, I think Cenk did run for president last election, right?
What's that?
Cenk did run for president last election.
Yeah, Cenk could do it. Like, he would be good at lobbying. And this is someone, I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, but when it comes to the war, when it comes to, hey, don't commit genocide, It's not. This isn't a left and right thing. This is a humanitarian thing. Stop shooting children. I don't know how you could find an issue with more unity than that. Like, don't rape kids, don't shoot kids. That's how low the bar is. There's international child sex trafficking rings. You get these guys like McSweeney and Peter Mandelson, they're all up in it. Lutnick too. Like, a lot of people in Trump's cabinet are. It is the Epstein class. It's not a joke. Epstein Fury sounds funny, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah, it is true. Ryan, quick update on what's happening in Lebanon.
It's kind of the same. They're losing the air war. They're winning on the ground, battlefield-wise, but the civilians are paying the ultimate price. They're losing their homes. Israel's, if they can't annex the land, they just want to make it no man's land. Seems to be their plan B. And I honestly, I don't think the Israelis know what else to do. They've bitten off more than they can chew. They keep playing the same playbook. Their Merkava tanks are lit up. Their staging areas. They're losing soldiers. They're losing vehicles. And now some of their tractors and things are using to demolish homes. Those are getting tagged. And it's the drones. It's the drone where they don't have an answer for it. So what do? They bomb Beirut way across the yellow line. Yellow line doesn't matter because that's just something they made up. The line is the border between Israel and Lebanon. Once you enter Lebanon, that's already, they're committing all manner of war crimes. There is no international law when it comes to Israel and the United States. And that it's just, but what can we do? This is really in the hands of Hezbollah to defend the country because the Lebanese government is sitting on its thumbs because they've been bribed to do so. So that's the situation there. And we can just, hope that Hezbollah, long plan of attrition, they knew, by the way, the civilians would be attacked. They knew what Israel was going to do. But ultimately, Israel can't stomach the casualties. You're having IDF injure themselves and leave in record numbers. They're fleeing because they have conscription. They're off in Thailand, Cyprus, wherever, and they're not coming back. So Israel cannot sustain that much longer, even if it's like 50-50 on the ground. This is another reason why they're hell-bent on dragging the U.S. back into the conflict.
I mean, that we know. I mean, we know the conflict is going to restart for that specific reason.
It is, yeah.
There's no other alternative. This whole negotiations have been fake. What's been like Trump's initial motive to drag this out was to resupply. Obviously, he's done that, and I presume that it's the China meeting that's made him kind of hold off. And then once after that, he'll go back to type, or do you think there was an additional factor behind it?
Well, when you mean resupply, it's gathering the standoff munitions. He also put another carrier in place. He brought the bush up, and he had to gather a bunch of refuelers. And now he's like, he had to negotiate with Saudi Arabia and UAE, say, look, you are going to allow us here, here, here. And they both came out and said they're not. But then, yes, they are. So that's what was going on during the delay. He doesn't want us to pop off before he meets with Xi. So he'll meet. He'll go there. It's the 14th in America time or our time, whatever. The 14th, 15th, he'll be meeting with the Chinese. I don't anticipate that going well at all. And then there's really nothing holding him back from round 2 or round 3, whatever you want to call it, with airstrikes. He's got everything in place. He brought his carries up. He brought his refuelers. He didn't do this dance for nothing. And he didn't do all this just to impress the Chinese. They see through it. In fact, it did the opposite. Watching America fall on its face, trying to target Iran, really kind of popped the balloon. The mystique is gone. Like, the U.S. is defeated by geography.
Yeah. So Ryan, always appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. People can find you on ryandawson.org. People can also find your Substack, which is Ryan Dawson. Everyone should check that out. It's free to subscribe, but you should think about becoming a paid members and support the work that people like Ryan do. It's not easy to do what we do. It's kind of exhausting, but we do it in order for you to get the information. So I appreciate you as always, Ryan. Thank you for coming.
Thank you as always. And when you Substack, I'll restack it. Substack's where it's at, man. For every real creator, if you don't want to get shadow banned or outright banned, they're really the only game in town.
Well, I'm gonna post this interview there, and yeah, I've been posting quite a lot on there recently, trying to push it up. So we'll
Excellent.
definitely appreciate
Yeah,
you,
let's
Ryan.
make an anti-APAC lobby, or take the ones we got and start lobbying, not just supporting candidates. Let's work together, guys.
Totally agree with you there. Totally agree with you. This is what we need. And I have actually no, I haven't. Okay, cool. Appreciate it. Thanks for that as always, Ryan. Everybody follow Ryan and on X, Ryan Liberty. Thank you so much, Ryan, as always.
Kansai first.
Appreciate it.
See you.
Thank you. That was Ryan Dawson, guys. Like, comment, and subscribe. Give me your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on his views. Comment. Now, what's happened with the audio? Is it okay now? Are you all crying? Let me know. Is the audio working or what? Or do I need to quickly reset before Pape? What do you guys think? Let me know in the chat. Chat, is the audio okay now or is the audio problematic? Let me know. You're typing away when I was doing the space. Give me your thoughts. There is a bit of a delay, obviously, so we'll let us know, and then I'm gonna try and quickly reset. No, I'm talking about now. Is the audio okay or still problematic even now? So someone saying, okay, so we've got a mixture of people. So we've got some people are probably behind, I'm guessing. But then how are they? Because they're... So is the audio okay now? Let's try again. Why is the user saying the audio is echoing? Is he just trolling? Because a lot of these guys do it. Let me see this guy's channel activity. No, he seems all right. All right, guy. So I don't know. Maybe he's behind. He's saying the audio is still a problem. My audio is good. I'm still gonna reset just in case because I don't want it to. I want it to be up to standards for Pape. So you're just gonna need a blank screen for 2 seconds while I make sure that there's no issue with the audio. I'll just make sure there's not an extra. No, there's not. There's nothing playing. So okay. Okay, so mine says it's fine. So I don't think it was me. I think it was Ryan. Because I want it to be good for when Professor Pape comes on. Okay, so I think it was Ryan, guys, because it seems all right now. I reset it, and it doesn't seem like there was any issue. So I think we're fine. We're gonna have Professor Pape coming on in a few secs. In the meantime, guys, if everyone could do it, I'm actually gonna go do it now. There's a tweet in the nest. It is the stream. So I want you to go to that one, the one that says Professor Robert Pape, Larry Johnson, Ryan Dawson. I want everyone to quote tweet that. Anyone who quote tweets it, I am gonna retweet your quote tweets. And let me just get the Wikipedia on Professor Pape. I know he works in the University of Chicago, but he works at some kind of he's like some kind of advisor as well. So let's see. He's an American political scientist who studied the national and international security affair with a focus on air power, political violence, social media propaganda, and terrorism. Oh my God, he might be Joe's like mentor or something. He is a professor of political science at the University of Chicago and a founder and director of the Chicago Project on Security and Threats, CPO. So he's a founder of CPO, Chicago. I'm sure he advised like the Pentagon or something as well. Let me check. He'll mention anyway. Brief. Oh yeah, he did. Pape briefed the National Security Council on over-the-horizon counter-terrorism strategies to end the war in Afghanistan. So he actually briefed the NSC, the National Security Council, on how to end the Afghanistan war. Okay, I'll mention that. And then he also published the results of his analysis of the impact of the deployment of the UN agents on political violence as well. So anyway, that should be good. Why is this showing? Why is it not showing clear for you guys? Okay, no, it's just the YouTube was showing that. Okay, cool. So we should have Professor Pape coming on. Obviously, I'll read his bio as well, because that'll be good. But yeah, Professor Pape, I'm super excited to have him on. Because and nobody, and I mean everybody, be able to interview like we do. So we'll get some really good conversations. Cyrus had a question where he said 70% chance there's going to be a ground invasion, but the American public doesn't support it. So how could they be? Okay, I'll ask that question. I'll ask you that question. Don't say I don't look after my boys. I'm just feeling a bit, when your butt gets tired. But anyway, we got Professor Pape coming on in a few seconds. It's going to be fire. It's going to be good. I honestly believe Iran already has nukes as well. Well, we'll have to wait and see on that. Okay. And yeah, it should be really good. Really, really good. We are super excited about Professor Pape coming on. So I've given you his bio. Obviously, I'll give a shorter bio when he comes on. Okay, let me just see if who's quote tweeted this. Is there any Zayos or what? Okay, I'm going to shout out all the people who did it. Legends. Zainab, legend. Did it immediately. Deborah. Thomas Burwell. April. I'm just retweeting everyone who's quote tweeted the video. Deborah again. Malise. Desha. Legend. He said, where else can you get in-depth coverage like this? Daniel. Amen. Cyrus. So you got to learn from Cyrus, guys. And myself. Okay, so I've retweeted everyone. I did say I would retweet, so I've done that. And almost ready. Well done, guys. What? Brilliant. Pump it out, guys. We've got 10,000 people in here, but we need more. I want 20,000 people for Professor Pape. Okay. Let's retweet this. Hi, Professor Pape. How are you? Professor Pape, can you hear me? Moving from the scene until we can see it. But yeah, I'll see. So we're just gonna get him up in a few seconds. Just waiting for him to basically look up. But I think he can't hear us then, that means, because Professor Pape, can you hear me? I don't think you can hear me. Professor Pape, can you hear me? Professor Pape, can you hear me? I don't think he can hear me. Can you hear me? Professor Pape, can you hear me? I don't think you can hear me. Can you put your audio on? Let me send him an email. And yeah, I just emailed him. What is it? Do you think it's because of this EVMux, but the quality is so good on it? So I don't know. The last couple of days have been a problem, but today only we had it with Professor Pape, Ryan, and then who was the third person we had a problem with? Professor Pape, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Professor Pape, can you hear me? He's
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Oh, great. I'm sorry. I was waiting for this. So let me just imagine, just 1 second. Where is the audio buttons to adjust on your, I don't know this platform.
Yeah, it's a high
I don't
quality one.
see a audio to adjust or speakers to adjust. So,
It's,
oh, wait, there's settings. Maybe under settings?
Yeah, under settings.
Okay, I'm under settings. Here's
Audio.
audio. Okay, audio. Just a minute.
Yeah.
So the setting to the default here.
Can you hear me now?
Can you please
Yeah.
speak now?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. It went to a default. Yes. So I'm sorry, sir, that what happens when a platform comes in is it adjusts the settings, but it doesn't show me how it's doing that.
Well, you're more technical than a couple of my guests today, so we really appreciate you sorting that out.
Well, your platform's not the first one to catch me by surprise, and it was exactly the same thing. It went to some default that does not exist.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you sorting that out. I was like, oh, I need to send you a StreamYard instead. So are you ready to start, Professor Pape?
Oh yeah, this is great. We're all set.
Brilliant. We've got a large audience listening, so they're super excited. They've been asking you for a very long time.
Well, big honor.
Okay, so just want to welcome Professor Pape from the University of Chicago. He has advised a number of governments, including the National Security Council, on basically how to get out of Afghanistan. So he is a geopolitical expert, but what he's become really famous for, especially recently blown up, is on his thesis called The Escalation Trap. Professor Pape, thank you so much for taking your time out to join us. How are you?
Oh, I'm just great, and it's just a great pleasure to be with you here. And hi to everybody who's there. A tremendous honor, and glad to speak with you.
Well, appreciate you coming on. So, Professor Pape, first question we've got for you is, obviously some of my audience are aware of you, some aren't. What is the escalation trap? If you can explain it as an overview for the audience.
The escalation trap emerged from 20 years of my modeling of the bombing of Iran, and then also studying air power, air war for 30 years. I've taught for the U.S. Air Force. I've also, if you look at my academic work, you'll see that I've basically been commenting on almost every single military engagement since the 1991 Gulf War. So there's this is not new to me to be in the media, but I'm in the media when there's usually a big war going on and there's a lot of escalation. What the escalation trap is a series of stages I laid out in the very first post I made on the escalation trap Substack, which I started just a few days before this war, where I laid out what I called the smart bomb trap. And that said, we would have stage one. We will drop bombs. I didn't know it would be exactly Saturday, but it did turn out to be just a few days later, as I thought. And those bombs would actually destroy the targets tactically and probably kill Iranian leaders, but they would not bring down the regime. I published multiple papers explaining why that is. I'm glad to go into that here. But it would lead to a stage two. Stage two is Iran would lash back. And other instances in history, this has happened, but this could be even worse because Iran is simply bigger. Serbia, when this happened in early 1999, 6 million people. Iran, 92 million people, Strait of Hormuz right there. So they would take Hormuz. And then this would lead to a trap because we've had a failure by the United States, the attacker, and the attackers in history rarely just give up after you have a strategic failure. And this isn't just a failure where it fails passively. The bombs didn't topple the regime. This is where Iran now got enormous power. A few weeks later, I published a big op-ed in the New York Times where I laid out and I defined what is happening for Iran. It's emerging as the fourth center of global power. This is not happening overnight, but think in about a year or two, and I'm glad to fill out the pieces of that. But this would then lead to the dilemma. The dilemma is a ground war dilemma. Do we go forward because it's the ground issues that suddenly become operative, or do we allow Iran to emerge as the fourth center of world power over time with all of those consequences? So there's a fork in the road. I've later even sharpened this to where we've had stage one, stage two of the escalation trap. We're now in a trap where we're choosing between stage three, further escalation on the military side, or stage four, allow Iran to emerge as the fourth center of world power. This idea that many have had, and I'm glad to explain this as well, that we would have some other off-ramp here. Well, in the first few days or first week or two, there were off-ramps. We chose not to take them. Now the idea that we have these negotiation avenues as off-ramps, they're just simply disappeared, and they're probably gone for weeks, if not months. And again, all these are just the top of the waves. I've laid out this in many, many articles on the Substack, and I'll be doing more. I try to do a couple every week. And every 2 weeks I do a live video briefing. So it's just turning out to be really a tremendous platform. And I'm so delighted to be here. I wish I had discovered all this earlier. It's really turning out to be a great way to bring the frameworks I've been developing for 30 years to a wider public.
Well, no doubt. You're on the biggest show on X now. So hopefully the X people will know you, because with X, people are so geopolitically aware. They have more like complex questions. And I've got a question for you. What were those initial off-ramps that you said that there could be in the first few days?
Yeah, so and this would also be, if you were to go back in my earlier briefings here, my earlier things on the media, the first few days in BBC, I was laying out right from the beginning that since the bombs would hit, I know quite a bit about air power. I have every confidence those bombs would tactically hit their targets, and I also thought there was a good chance we would kill leaders. Well, they did that on first day. So what President Trump could have done is by Monday, this happened on a Saturday morning, and he laid out he wanted regime change. Well, only at that point in time on Saturday, barely 20% of the U.S. public even knew we were bombing Iran. I mean, just think about that. So President Trump had an opportunity, say on the Monday, to simply say, mission accomplished, done all that. Still, probably only 20% of the public would have noticed this, and then moved on to some domestic issue. I did mention this. And then later on, in a piece in Foreign Affairs, that's a flagship policy journal in it's really the world's policy journal, but it's published in Washington, D.C. It's called Foreign Affairs. I laid out a longer piece on Iran's strategy called horizontal escalation. That's the actual concept Iran is using. And I say in there again that even though this had been about 2 weeks out, still there was an opportunity for President Trump to simply walk away. He would have to pay a higher price at that point because more people would have noticed here. So if you wait 2 weeks, you're going to get more people in the public to know things aren't going so well. But he still, I think, could have done it. And then third, the third time I did this was probably about a month in, where I started to lay out again these breaking points podcasts that I do every week. So I started to lay out again that what you could do here is you could start to develop an off-ramp as we're heading to the negotiations, where you start to develop a military containment of Israel. Because one of the big issues here is, well, if you pull back and walk away, won't Israel just start bombing again in a few months anyway, and we're kind of right back in the thick of things? Well, you could use that as a possible way to develop a military containment of Israel, where you're going to explicitly contain, deter Israel. And it's really not true we have no power over Israel. We do have some. And so what we should do is you could use it. Well, President Trump didn't take that either. So it really is the case that there were some off-ramps here. But now all of that has passed, and as time has gone on, this has just turned into a colossal disaster. I mean, it's a disaster on so many different fronts that this has now made this trap of the escalation trap, not just escalation ladder, but a trap just more severe than ever, because now President Trump is being humiliated on the world stage almost every week by Iran. So we saw, this was 2 weeks ago, Iran sent some negotiators to Pakistan, and President Trump tried to crash the party and get Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to actually go there. Literally, almost as they are boarding the plane to fly to Pakistan, the Iranian negotiator, the diplomat said, oh no, we're not here to talk to the Americans. We've done what we want to do in Pakistan. We're going to Russia. Think about that. I mean, oh my goodness gracious. Then Chancellor of Germany, Merz, a few days after that, he adds insult to injury, where he announces to the world how humiliating all this is. Here, and this, I could just go on. So it's the humiliation that's occurring. The lack, now Iran is growing its diplomatic influence. So as its power is growing, its diplomatic influence is growing. And then now you have the local Gulf countries starting to pull away from the United States military. They're just Saudi Arabia, as a lot of your listeners will know, just this week said at a certain point, you can't use our airspace. Well, if you just look at a map, and a lot of you will know on my X account, I love publishing maps, Saudi Arabia has got a gigantic area. So when you say you can't use Saudi airspace, and you can't use it for refueling either, oh my goodness gracious, this is a big deal. Kuwait said that too. So you're seeing it's just one thing after another after another. This is already the worst strategic disaster, misstep, colossal mistake by the United States since the Vietnam War. It is heading to become the biggest mistake we have ever made, including the Vietnam War. And so this is really what I mean by the trap part of the escalation trap.
And just to add to your point, there was a report today by CBS News that Iran has 90% of its missile and missile launchers still intact. In addition to that, there was a report that Iran has 30 out of 33 missile centers, which are on the shores of the Strait of Hormuz, still intact as well. And you saw what you just said now, which was great frustration for Trump, where he pulled out a tweet, I think about an hour ago, where he was saying, you're committing treason. By even stating this, by giving Iran false hope, you're committing treason. So you can see frustration in that. So
and again, just keep in mind the real opportunity to just cut bait and accept the short loss was those couple days after the first attack, when only 20% of the U.S. public was paying attention. Look at what's happening now. Everybody's paying attention. We're sort of on, pins and needles. What's going to happen? And that's so much of the public now. So when you get this report that we didn't. We grossly inflated the damage is. You now have an embarrassment here of the first order, and it's not just Democrats. It's all the independents, and it's a whole slew of the Republicans. Even the Republicans who don't want to admit it are seeing that stuff. So what you're seeing here is just it's every turn here. We're in a situation where it's going to be extremely hard now to even really imagine this isn't going to become a forever war. It doesn't mean it will be a hot war every day, just as in Afghanistan and Iraq, it was not a hot war every day. There will be punctuations here up. There'll be some long lulls. That's what forever wars look like. That's what Vietnam looked like. Here. So it's not literally a day-by-day hailstorm every single day, but there are going to be days of hailstorms coming. That is for sure.
So question about, and by the way, just to add to your point, 63% of Americans, according to a YouGov poll, believe America's lost the war. Only about 13% believe they won. So I agree with you there. But question for you in terms of the escalation trap, in terms of not having any other option, why can't the United States of America walk away? And what I mean by that is you walk away, you don't remove the sanctions. Iran still has control of the Strait, but it's kind of in a weak state where they're going to be able to charge a toll, but then you got the Omani area. They're going to be almost trapped in themselves because right now they're in war, so they're kind of saying you can't use Omani shores, but then you can't. Could that not be the case where America walks away? Would that not be a way of sorting out the...
well, certainly this is what a lot of people would like to just simply have happen. And there's no doubt if you put it to the poll here in the United States, especially a secret poll, let's imagine we could do a secret referendum. So you would not really have to be worried about whether anybody saw what you voted for. I'm pretty sure you'd get 2/3 of the public, maybe even more, to just say, as some people put it to me, if we could march in, let's just march out. Okay. And there's a good case for that, of course, because as you're saying here, this gives some sense that we have an equilibrium, that there's now an equilibrium that has some stasis and so forth. But there's a couple issues here. The number one issue is that the public doesn't really get a vote here unless it's an election. So the public has a lot to say here, but what we need to think about with the public, and I'm starting to do this with my Substack, so I'm going to be announcing, I won't say it here because I don't have all the pieces yet, but starting to do more in-person events here, and that's something that has not been common on Substack, I just discovered here, but nonetheless. This is because we need to start thinking about this as not just like what is going to happen in the next week. We'll certainly comment on everything on the way. I'm not saying we won't do that. What I'm saying is that we need to understand that this is really, really important over time, and where the public gets real voice here is in elections and over time. And it doesn't mean, by the way, I'm seeing on my Substack, I see people who are from progressive liberals to conservatives here. I am not really seeing that this is only this anger and upset and fear about the war is really only focused on one side. And that's why I said a secret, because I do think that when you ask people on the polls, and I know I do some polling, you tend to get people who are saying things strategically sometimes. And so if you're a Trump supporter, you may not want to be fully disclosing how unhappy you are. But nonetheless, I see a wide spectrum here. And I believe that over time, this is going to lead to some pretty major change. And but it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. And while we're waiting for that, it is going to be very important to talk about the day by day, the week by week, because this really is going to evolve on that pace, and it's going to be that way for weeks and probably months.
So just on the what would be the negative from America's, other than maybe Trump's ego? But the thing is,
oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Thank you. I went in. I'm a professor. Remember,
we love our professors.
I'm a media guy. So thank you for reminding me I didn't answer the question. So I hear you. Wasn't ducking. No, it's the problem here is when I said the public doesn't get a vote in the short term, it's the president who's on the hook. And some of it is straight ego, I would say. But having been an advisor, advise. I've never been a paid advisor. I've never gotten a paycheck from the West Wing. So just to be clear, but I have advised every West Wing from 2001 to 24. That's to Republican to Democrat on different issues. Here, I think that there's a couple of things going on. Number one, for sure, President Trump and his team is extremely concerned about how this is damaging his presidency. Now it's probably still a little too soon to say it's irreversibly damaged, but it's not too soon to say they are terrified it will irreversibly damage. And so for him to accept a big loss here of the walking away, this is not just a Republican thing. This is the president's presidency would be probably irreversibly crushed here. And that's something that we saw with Lyndon Johnson. So in the Vietnam War, we did see a president in the middle of a war effectively reverse course and walk away. I think it was the right thing for the country in the Vietnam War. I do think it's probably going to be the right thing here too. I mean, I'm really not resisting this, but I am giving you an explanation, which is presidents just don't do that very often. Lyndon Johnson did, okay, but that he's the anomaly, not the norm. And what they do instead, and even Johnson did 4 years, so he didn't walk away until this was 3 years in to the Vietnam War. What they do instead is they ratchet up. They'll take escalation. Now, they'll also try to negotiate. Lyndon Johnson, 5 years we engaged in peace negotiations with the North Vietnamese. So it wasn't like there was no negotiations going on. It's like what you're seeing here, the side that's winning, which was North Vietnam then and now Iran. They're winning, and they're winning cleanly and strongly. They really don't have an incentive to help President Trump with a fig leaf. So there's no cover being given to President Trump to leave. So what you're seeing is President Trump would have to really own the loss. Some of it is a personal ego, but it's also the crushing collapse of a presidency that still has 2 years to run, which would hobble the entire Trump agenda and Republicans. And maybe even saddle them not just with a loss or losses in midterms, but even loss in the 2028. So that's the really big reason why it's so hard to just walk away, and it's really coming from the fact of the president and his losses.
So I mean, I agree that it's going to be very difficult to kind of relate to the public why it's a loss. But if there's anybody who can sell ice the Eskimo or try and make it look like he won, it's Donald Trump. If you look at it, he said the entire Iranian military is under the sea. He talks about destroying the entire military prowess.
I was so with you, again, in those off-ramps here that I was talking about. I was in the media a lot, and I've been willing to do media across the band here, so including on conservative as well as liberal channels. And so basically I was giving all of that rhetoric here, hoping somebody in the West Wing was watching here. I just think that what's happening is that would have worked a few weeks into the war. Right now, this is a gigantic problem in terms of loss of and humiliation, and not just ego. Again, it means really dramatic political losses as time goes on, because when you walk away, Iran will probably not return the price of oil to where it was on February 27. Iran is going to enjoy having the price of oil where it is today or even higher, because its ally Russia is making money hand over fist. It is able to have real leverage over certain economies in the Persian Gulf that are now staunch existential enemies, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So that oil price here is a function of that oil not coming out from those countries, and also with that oil price, that oil not coming out, this is a good way to deter America's allies, like, say, Japan or even Europe, from thinking about, as they've said, maybe they'll get involved with some sort of military issue once the war is over. Well, Iran will have ways of reminding them that they may think the war is over, and America may pull out its carriers and its military forces, but Iran will still control that oil. So I think that Iran is not going to simply, again, if America pulls back, say, oh, sure, now we're going to let the oil go back to where it was 11 weeks ago and not build nuclear weapons. I think Iran will keep the price of oil up high for quite some time, maybe years here, and Iran will want nuclear weapons probably in a year or two. I think it's probably 75 or even higher % likely that 18 months from now, Iran will have a nuclear test. And even if they gave up all of their enriched uranium right now, they have all of them what they need to, the wherewithal to do that. It's really now they have maximum incentive. And I think this is going to make it, again, unbelievable black eye after black eye after black eye for the Trump administration, not just President Trump here himself. The entire Trump administration's political prospects will completely sink to the bottom of the Persian Gulf.
By the way, I agree with you. I was just trying to get the information across to the public. In reality,
it's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Because, like, just to add to your point, like South Korea and Japan are an example of two countries who are U.S. allies who rely so much on the Strait of Hormuz. They've had to negotiate directly with Iran, even to get, for example, Japan negotiated directly with Iran to get the 2 million barrels of oil. If America walks away, Japan's going to have to start making not just toll deals, but overarching trade deals, and that means ignoring the sanctions, ignoring everything. It destroys the entire American empire. So he is stuck in that.
So another way to put it, again, I'm sorry to be a downer here about it, because I want this to be over too. I pay the price of gas. I'm worried about what this will mean for our debt position and all of that. Here, I'm just like, I'm in the soup like everybody else, so I want it to go away too. But just imagine, it took us 20 years to stop the forever wars. Just think about that. Different administrations. We had Democratic administrations as well. And I was a big advocate of ending those forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Oh, my goodness gracious. A lot of what I was doing with those different West wings was advocating and laying out all the good reasons to do that. And so forth. And I'm sorry to say, I know people want to hear that, oh, it's just one party or one man. However, that was not my experience with the forever wars, and it was very, very frustrating. And even when you had people in the presidency who actually leaned in that direction, there's just amazing amounts of pushback here. And it wasn't just coming from the Israel lobby here. There's just a fundamental issue that when you accept that big loss, you are really, really, a lot of the advisors, the people doing the campaign polling and everything, they are going to be saying, if you do this, you are going to lose 10 seats, 12 seats, X seats. They're going to operationalize that. And I've seen it. So this is real. And unfortunately, this is why I fought so hard and was trying to, stop, doing everything I could in the early, before the war started and as a coach, because this one is the biggest problem we've had. We've taken on the biggest enemy, the biggest challenge, the most difficult enemy to beat since World War II. Iran is more difficult to beat than Vietnam, and we couldn't beat Vietnam. So this is I understand the public had no reason why the public should have known this. But this is why I put so much energy into it, and I'm sorry to say we are now in the trap, and the trap has really got us tight here, and It is, in my view, we're going to be not in a stable equilibrium. What we're going to be doing is bouncing between escalation path, that's what I call the stage 3 in the trap, and the allowing Iran to emerge as a fourth center of world power track. So it's not so much we'll choose between one or the other. We'll probably just move back and forth every few weeks here, and it won't be stable the way. And that's and you'll see that with the gas prices will just keep going up. So this is what we unfortunately have in front of us.
So in terms of your escalation trap, you've got stage 3 and you've got stage 4. Now, stage 4 is essentially making Iran the next global power.
Yeah, allowing it.
Allowing it to, yeah. And a part of allowing it to would be making a deal. Deal would be, for example,
you could, but you see that Iran here is similar to what we did in World War II. We were willing to make a deal. We called it unconditional surrender, and then a deal never happened against Germany, and that's why the Soviet 3 million man army and the American and British 3 million man army met face to face in the middle of Germany, and that's how Germany got divided. So that idea of unconditional surrender, that's what Iran has adopted. They have adopted exactly a page right out of the playbook of unconditional surrender in World War II, and it's producing exactly the same results. When we declared unconditional surrender, this stiffened the back of the Germans. This did not make Germany quiet. In fact, there was a coup attempt against Hitler, famously in the summer of 1944, that lost support. It had some support, enough to at least have a bomb go off and almost kill Hitler. But it actually, we know in history, it lost support. And it did not have, like, after the bomb went off, there was not like even greater support or something. So what you're seeing is that Iran is just is not budging 1 inch, and they're making it absolutely crystal clear that what a deal would mean is you surrender on everything. And what does surrender mean? They said in this most recent one that Iran would become sovereign over the Strait of Hormuz, meaning they could set the level of the tolls permanently, meaning that they would set the price of oil for the world permanently. That's what a deal means to Iran here, which would then allow them to reap in probably $100 billion a year in revenue, just to put some numbers on this here. And I realize we didn't blow up as much of their equipment, but they could more quickly rebuild everything even more. It would allow them to start to exert influence to not just weaken the economies of the UAE and Saudi Arabia, but those countries need to see that Iran wants to topple their governments. And in the next 2 years or so, don't be surprised if one of the Gulf states' governments falls. This is that serious, because these powers, when they start to get this level of power, they want more power. The United States, we look at what happened when there was all these socialist and communist takeovers here in our backyard. We started to do coups. We started to do this. We tried to assassinate Fidel Castro. How many times did we try to assassinate him? Well, we're not unique in history. This is you see Putin doing this. You're going to see Iran doing this, and this is what it means. So Iran is not going to be a benign regional hegemon. It's going to be a regional hegemon that wants more power, and I don't think it's going to make concessions.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. You're saying Iran isn't going to make concessions, the US isn't going to make concessions, and that's why stage 4 is unlikely in your thesis.
Well, that's why stage 4 will not be agreed to by the United States, but it will be allowed. What will happen is, because the escalation side there's only this fork in the road. Either you escalate with military force, or you don't, in which case Iran keeps growing its power here. Now, it'll go growing its power incrementally, bit by bit. It's not like a light switch. It suddenly has it. But this will just go on, and then I think you'll see this instability. We'll flip-flop back and forth. Are we going to bomb? So if we started to bomb, as you're already hearing it, the essentially White House is leaking into all their buddies on Fox News that after the summit with Xi, that's when Trump's going to start the bombing. Well, that if that happens, don't be surprised if it's relatively short. Maybe it's going to be a short bombing, and then Trump will say, "See, I am going to hit you hard. Let's try to negotiate again." And what that is bouncing back and forth between really 3 and 4. And that could go on for a while. They could try, for example, another round of leadership decapitation. I was just on with Dubai talking about this, and it's for an hour, really. And the reason is because if we try another round of leadership decapitation, you've got to expect, if you're in the UAE and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, Bahrain, that Iran now will retaliate by having drone strikes and missile strikes to kill the leaders in those countries. So it's not going to be the case, I think, that Iran's going to keep sitting there and letting its leaders keep getting killed, and have ability to launch back at the Gulf state leaders and still remain restrained forever. They've been restrained. It might not feel that way to the Gulf, but they've been restrained. And what that means is they got more damage they can do, including against the leaders directly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, in terms of the deal, and I'm with you, I think this is unlikely, but just in this hypothetical thought experiment, if there was a scenario where maybe Iran was a little bit more amiable, America was a little bit more amiable, they had a nuclear agreement, so that was like 3.69% as an example. Iran can't enrich for 5 years because they've already got the ability to do so anyway, so it won't impact the enrichment. And they dilute the 60%, but they don't need to send it out to, for example, the United States of America. And then Iran is allowed control of the Strait of Hormuz, as an example. Could there still be a deal? And what I mean by that is, would something like that deal stop the escalation trap up from stage 3? I know in the end, stage 4, the byproduct of that will be stage 4.
Well, there's 2 issues with the deal. The first one is that whenever the deal would be, that deal would occur, and let's assume it's going to occur, because we're hypothetically assuming it's going to occur. The problem is there's no court of justice, there's no umpire to enforce the United States to live up to their part of the bargain, or to enforce Israel, even if Israel were to go along with no strikes or so forth here. So you could say, well, this is the deal, they've cut a deal, they've made it to, they're going to stop the war. We were basically at that point last June. So you recall that there was a 12-day war, and we declared complete victory, absolute success. And then we said, well, we'll just go back to negotiating. Well, it's sort of like what you're describing. You have a little more detail, a little bit different substance, but it's the basic idea. And then what happened 8 months later is escalation was not linear. It's not like escalation but 8 months later, the United States and Israel, for their own reasons, and we're sort of finding out more and more about those reasons every day, they just decided they were going to go and attack. Well, there's no, the UN can't go and arrest Donald Trump and say, oh, you violated a contract like it was a real estate deal. There's nothing to enforce this except the use of force by Iran. So the problem is, if Iran makes concessions like you're describing, they're effectively making themselves more vulnerable to the next round of military strikes by the United States and Israel whenever they decide to do it. And they don't even have to have, as we saw, a good reason to do it. So it's not like this is the problem in international politics. The second thing I would say is I do think that over time, what you're going to see is Iran will want to keep controlling the price of oil, but it may be more amenable to do it in somewhat more of a cooperative way as we get into, say, January. So I know people don't want to hear January. What do you mean January? Because that means months of this. But if you look at it from Iran's perspective, they probably are going to imagine they're the new OPEC. They're going to set the price. So what did OPEC do? They didn't set the price to be $200 a barrel. They wanted the price to be high enough that all those countries made money, but not so high that it would trigger offshore drilling, which is very expensive. So the Not so much so you would start to extract more oil from, say, northern Africa. Again, more expensive area to go into. Another way to put it is, if the price of oil were to truly be $200 a barrel and stay there for several months, this would lead to the oil companies investing many billions of dollars here in all of those other hard to get places here, and that's why OPEC never did that. Their ideal price of oil was not at 60, really. It was sort of around 80. And I think Iran probably want to have it around closer to 90, 95. And that's the sweet spot for making as much cash as you can and not giving the other side incentives to invest in ways you lose your cash cow. So I think Iran is going to see itself in very similar situation.
So now coming back to stage 3, I'm aware that in a specific interview you mentioned, I know you don't like doing percentages, but I think the host got you to say that you think that the chances of getting a ground invasion is probably about 70%. And I guess the question on that is with such a high percentage of a ground invasion, when you've got almost everyone in the United States of America, I think certain pollings recently said something, but various polling, 70 to 90% of Americans are against this war. How would you manufacture consent, other than maybe a false flag, for Americans to agree to a ground invasion, which is 70%?
Well, you're seeing that in the Strait of Hormuz as we speak. So if you look at, so first of all, I do think that, as I said, the public wants to feel like it has power here, and Congress wants to feel like it has power. But for Congress to act, they're going to have to vote to cut off the money and the operations. That means Congress takes ownership of Iran becoming the nuclear hegemon, oil hegemon. So now you have Trump, and I think Trump would actually maybe even like this, by the way. Trump would probably love it if Congress would vote to cut off the money for the war in a hard way, because then he could say, oh, it's not me. I could have won this war. The problem is Congress and those, start calling them again rhino Republicans. You see what I mean? So there is, but that's what that would take. Now, where I am today here is based on not the public, really, but on the bomb damage assessment that's coming out in the New York Times and elsewhere over the last several weeks. It's not just one report. I would lower it closer to about 60%. So it's not quite at 70% where it was. It's not at 40% yet either, though. And the reason is because, and you saw this most recent when we came on, the New York Times got an even deeper look at the BDA or what the CIA report is, essentially. And what you see is the damage to the Iran's missiles is far more modest than the Secretary Haig says victory rhetoric here, and also General Kane's rhetoric would have you believe. So this is far more moderate, which means any ground force that we would move in, the casualty count, the expectations, and I gave more detailed analysis of this on Substack, but they would be at the higher end now. They would be still at the higher end. So this is going to make it hard for the military to not put up all kinds of bureaucratic resistance to this. So I think this is not, it doesn't mean you can't go forward under these conditions, but it does mean that the fact is before a ground operation would happen, I think you would have now a much more extensive bombing campaign. And yes, we've run out of, say, Patriots and interceptors and so forth. But I wrote a paper on this on Substack in the first week of the war, anticipating we were going to run out of all this boutique, cool stuff, and say, well, here's what we would do with dumb bombs. And the truth is, a lot of these targets we would go after with dumb bombs. And it means a lot more collateral damage. I laid this out so that it's not like when you run out of the preferred weapon here, we have zero weapons in the arsenal. It means the risk would then be borne mostly by the Iranians is going to go up, and that means the risk of terrorism coming back at us would go up. So again, this is not these are the real squiggles and waves that we have to negotiate and deal with in the coming weeks and months. And I'm glad to do that here and walk through the details as they unfold. But it's again, the idea that people have is that, well, they're looking for a true equilibrium, an actual guardrail that will block President Trump from doing anything. This is the richest country in the world. We're the biggest military in the world. President Trump's the most powerful individual on the planet. We're going to be some time before we actually reach a guardrail like that.
And also, if you were to use dumb bombs, the problem is they'll have to creep closer. And obviously, when you creep closer, you're going to have a lot more jets being taken out by Iran as well. And so that
what you'll do is fly at high altitude. So this is what the B-52s. So you won't use the air or the altitudes around 15,000 feet or so that you might use and so forth. You're going to be going up higher, and you're going to be doing it in ways that you have more protection around you here. And so it is the case, by the way, that if Europe, not just Germany, were to completely deny us the use of their bases and airspace, Spain has, Italy has, but if you have Europe do this, and then you also have all the Gulf countries do this, that would be the most substantial actual physical block that you would have. I just think we're some ways away from those kind of things happening. It's not impossible, but I don't think this is the level at which it would have to get to here before all the different avenues we would have would be taken away. So we just have to recall we have built quite an armada here. We spend in terms of military spending, our military spending of the United States, we spend over half of all the military budgets of the next 6 militaries combined. So just to put it in some perspective, and President Trump in 2025, he increased the defense budget more than anything else. The only thing that went up higher was ICE and DHS here. And he's asked for another 50% increase of the defense budget in the coming year here. And this is going to be a long war. So if Congress wants to cut off the money, they can literally stop this on a dime or pretty close to it here, at least within a couple weeks of the pipeline running out, just like they did Trump's wall. It took a while to even come up with some money try to do that with the wall, but they're going to take ownership of this. And that's going to be a problem. I don't think the Democrats, I don't think they really want to own it. They want to run on it. That's different than owning responsibility for Iran becoming the fourth center of world power. That's going to be.
I completely agree with you. I don't think the Democrats are going to do that. And also I do think that the Israeli lobby does have an impact. But in addition to your point,
they do, and I'm just also so I hope that and I realize some folks won't like this. I'm not coming at this as a Democrat. I'm not coming at this as a Republican. I'm coming at this as somebody who cares about America. I care about people too. I care about people in other countries. So if you look at all my writings here, you will see that is this a Democrat or Republican? What's going on here? Okay, well, what's going on is you've got somebody who's for 30 some years really been in focusing on whether or not this is going to be adding to value for America's security. Are we going to be hurting people to no good purpose here? And I'm not searching for that job in either White House. I'm just not doing it. I'm very happy being a professor at the University of Chicago. And this allows me to do this work. And now with your opportunity here and also X and the Substack, just think about what a great honor it is for somebody like me to be able to share more fully than just a quick reaction for a minute or two here with people. And I just it's just amazing how people seem to be hungry for some more of this depth.
Well, first of all, it's an honor and a privilege for us to have you because I can't explain how my audience has been asking for you. They've always been, have you heard Professor Pape's theory about escalation trap? And I said, okay, we're going to try and get him. So we really appreciate taking your time out. One last question before we let you go, Professor Pape. You mentioned about the Gulf states. And with the Gulf states, if you remember with the Saudi and Kuwait, they said that they did not allow the US to use the airspace. You mentioned it earlier. And the claim, according to other newspapers in the mainstream media, is that the reason they did it was because they were unhappy with Trump's response when it came to the UAE. And Trump got on the phone with the MBS and he gave him some assurances. And obviously, those assurances are probably going to be, again, something got to do with kinetic. And so you mentioned about your stage 4 and your stage 3. And the Gulf, this adds to your theory, the Gulf states, will they not be even more pressuring, along with Israel, but also the Gulf states pressuring Trump even more so to go down stage 3 because they fear stage 4 so much?
You're going to see fragmentation with the Gulf states. Some will push for stage 3 here. MBS pushed for the leadership decapitation strikes in the beginning. I think that it wouldn't be at all surprised that UAE, Saudi Arabia would keep pushing for the stage 3. Others here, I think, are already starting to move here. And I think you're going to start to see that this is going to be each of the states now. When I say fragmentation, I mean each state will make its own decision and not want to be held unto a wave decision. So I think that's why UAE, for example, withdrew from OPEC, where they're really not wanting, it's not so much it's a little bit like France not being part of NATO. It's not exactly they'll never cooperate with the other Gulf states. They're making a clear signal to their own people, their own leaders, the leader-to-leader signal, that they're not going to let their security and survival be dictated by some other country or some other leaders, whether that's Israel, whether that's Saudi Arabia being influenced by UAE and vice versa. I think this is what you're seeing, sir. And I think that this fragmentation will open up more opportunities for Iran because now Iran is working more closely. We thought, originally many people were saying, well, Pakistan is going to be a mediator, treating them like Norway here or some truly neutral. No, Pakistan provided hundreds and hundreds of centrifuges to Iran in 2001 and 2 in order for Iran to start this whole nuclear program in the first place. I think what you're going to see is that over time, as the Gulf states fragment here on the other side of the Gulf, you're going to see this diplomatic coalition, which is Iran, Pakistan, Russia, and China, start to make some headway. It might be incremental, inch by inch, but that's how great politics really works. Great politics is often incremental, and then in periods of like over a month or two, there's something abrupt, but then it goes back to incremental. It's rarely a linear situation where it's at a peak, a 10 out of 10, day in, day out, for months after months. That we look in hindsight to these wars and we say, oh, that was a war. But if you follow it in real time, as we are here, it's the same. It's punctuated terror with weeks of what seemed like relative boredom.
And I know so the last question is a teeny question, which is, if you had to make a prediction, I know you may not want to, but then I know you get asked these questions all the time. Ground invasion, within what time span do you think this could happen?
I think that between now and, say, June 15th, which is about a month from now, I think that's the 60% or so possibility of taking Karg or taking a piece of territory. And the reason is because I can see that Trump can easily be moved to the position of the bargaining chip. So it's not so much the options are at all new here, but if you see Netanyahu on Sunday is effectively calling for U.S. troops to go into Escalation or these other far more dangerous situations where the casualties here could be in the hundreds. I mean, really, it could be quite dangerous here. And so I think that as President Trump starts to look at all these different options, he's probably going to start to get tempted to go back to these very limited territorial grabs, which, by the way, is what I said 3 days before the ground war. I mean, sort of the first bomb fell, is this phase 3 would start to look like limited territorial grabs, not gigantic invade with 200,000 troops. And it's because this was always going to be the way ground forces were going to get introduced in this war. And that was before the Marines moved. That's before any commentator said that. So really was the case. This is tragic but predictable.
Professor Pape, thank you so much for taking your time out to join us. Really appreciate you. I know you have an excellent Substack, which is called Escalation Tramp. People should go to your Substack, follow it, and subscribe. You also have an X handle. What's the X handle? Is it Robert?
Oh, at Professor Pape.
At Professor Pape. So everyone should follow.
It's Professor Pape. Yeah. So I want people to know. I know it may seem obvious but so many times I go on the media and they don't have. Sometimes they have doctors, so people think I'm a medical doctor. So that's why I'm trying to go Professor Pape. And it's my wife who gets frustrated because she says the media will bring you on. A lot of times they only put your name down there and nobody knows you're a professor.
Well, we love our professors. I'm a big advocate for education. Yeah. So everyone should be following Professor Pape. Everyone should be following your Substack. Thank you so much for taking your time out to join us.
Thank you. It's quite an honor. And so thank you all for listening here. And I hope I do get to engage with you. So thank you very much.
Appreciate you as always, Professor Pape. An honor and privilege for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay. Have a nice evening, everybody.
You too. That was Professor Pape. Make sure you're following him on Substack. I read his Substack. You should be reading his Substack. It is brilliant. You're going to be losing out if you're not reading it. What a huge prediction. He says war is coming. Ground invasion is coming within a month. That's a bold prediction. Let's see if that's right. That's going to be awesome to see. Now, guys, what I'm going to do is, because I know some on the YouTube, I know we've got a smaller audience on YouTube, but some of you were saying the audio wasn't great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send Larry Johnson, I'm going to send him the StreamYard link instead. And that way we don't have an issue. So just give me 2 seconds while I send that to Larry. No, Larry's going to be early though. So let's hope he's not. I sent it to David Icke, didn't I? So let me just... Okay, I forgot to say, like, comment, and subscribe. Put your notifications on. Obviously, I'm going to cut this bit out now, so I kind of flop. But like, subscribe. Okay, here we go. Hopefully, it's not too late. Send Larry the new link. New link to join. Hopefully. Okay, I know Larry doesn't like StreamYard as well, so let's see. Okay, I'm gonna switch this to StreamYard because y'all were saying it wasn't good. I'm just jumping on now. Okay. Okay, let's see. Hopefully this is better. Let me put my StreamYard on here as well so I can I like Professor Pape. I'll be honest with you. He's a smart guy. We're on day 74 now, guys. It's crazy. Okay, cool. So that's sorted. So let me see if it's this one. Is the audio a bit better, guys? Can you hear? We've got Larry Johnson coming on. Larry is a legend. Bro, Professor Pape is so good. You know he's so good. And And I like the fact that, when you're having a conversation, he's like just jumps in and he's so active and interactive. It makes it into a real convo rather than like question, answer, what I'm trying to say. So I liked it. I liked it a lot. We got Larry Johnson coming on, and then I know Doc wants to talk some smack about that. So let's see what he's got to say in a second once we've got Larry Johnson on. We'll see about that. Okay, cool. We'll have to just see if the issue is the in that. Let me just see. Just waiting for Larry Johnson to join. I ended that one a bit earlier because not earlier. Oh, sick. Larry's a legend. He literally got the message and came on the right one. Okay, that's awesome. Let's bring him on. Hi, Larry. How you doing? Can you hear me?
Can.
Brilliant. We had to change up because we're having some audio issues. It's late in the night. You're chilling. You got your cigar. How's it going?
Yeah. Usually when I do anything after 7 p.m., I'm out in the lanai smoking a cigar.
I like it. Okay, let's start. I just want to welcome former CIA Larry Johnson. He's a geopolitical expert, a favorite of the show, always giving us the most brilliant, excellent geopolitical analysis. Appreciate you coming on, Larry. How are you?
Good. Flattery will get you everywhere.
I know it always works, Larry. It always works. But Larry, let me ask you a question. So today we had some news, and let's get into it. So the first piece of news we had, which is something you've been mentioning. So I guess it's kind of clarifying and basically demonstrating that you were vindicated again, which is that CBS News, I believe it was CBS News, reported that Iran has 90% of its missile supplies left, and 30 out of 33 missile launch places on the Strait of Hormuz are still intact. This isn't looking good for the United States of America and the claim they made about destroying Iran's missile and missile launch capability.
Yeah. Well, early on, the first 2 weeks of euphoria, we're destroying everything. Iran was using a lot of decoys supplied by China. And so the United States was blowing up decoys. I've always maintained that we never had good intelligence on what Iran actually has from a missile standpoint, simply because they're manufactured underground and they're moved around underground and they're launched from underground. Not that many are launched from above ground. So we don't have, well, we may have ground penetrating radar. We don't have radar that can actually penetrate and count missiles underground. And so I always assumed that whatever number we came up with was more wishful thinking than based on actual hard intelligence.
Okay, and so you're saying that they missed largely because of decoys. Is it that, and is it also in addition to that faulty intelligence, maybe old intelligence? Because remember, when they hit the girls' school, that was a school that in 2016, up until 2016, was a base, and therefore it was 10-year-old information. What's your thoughts?
Well, it shows the danger of relying on AI. That AI doesn't necessarily come up to speed with being accurate. I copied a video or I was writing about a video that Kevin Walmsley, who does Inside China Business, and so I punched in something and the AI came back and said, "Oh no, Inside China Business is by some other guy," and I went back to the AI. I said, "No, it's not. It's Kevin Walmsley." And after a few minutes, the AI comes back and goes, "Oh yeah, you're right. Our bad." So, if you over rely on technology and take human judgment out of the equation, you're going to have things like blowing up schools with little girls. Now, some maintain that it was a deliberate targeting. I doubt that, but I can't definitively prove that's not the case. So, the battle damage assessment early on, they're on over So that's why the U.S. seems so confident. Oh yeah, we've taken this out, but blowing up decoys, and I don't think they had a full grasp of the underground cities. But whereas Alistair Crook, who's been there and been inside, that was much. I relied more on Alistair, knowing that he had been there and done that, as opposed to this over reliance upon some of our technical systems, satellites, etc.
So obviously that's in terms of their failure to harm Iran's military capability. Since then, Iran has actually said that they've been producing a lot more missiles, they've been producing a lot more drones. The Iranian, who was it again? I think it was Galibaf, or it could be one of the Iranians, said that they've now got 125% supply compared to February the 27th. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, well, that's exactly right. I understand that the U.S. has been monitoring shipments that are coming from Russia and China for things like computer chips. Gee, what could they be using those for? Oh, they work in guidance systems for rockets, missiles. And the underground cities they've been manufacturing. They haven't been sitting still. So whatever existed at the end, this thing's now going into its 11th week. Because you figure, it started on February 28th, got 31 days in March, that's 32. You got 30 days in April, that's 62. And now we're here at 12 days, 74 last I checked.
Yeah, that's right.
7 times 10, that's 70. So we're 4 days into the 11th week. So the ceasefire started basically almost 6 weeks ago. So they've been manufacturing in the last 6 weeks, and I have much more confidence in the ability of the Iranians to manufacture missiles at a fairly rapid pace compared to that of the United States, because we've got concrete proof based upon number of Tomahawks produced, number of JASSMs produced, number of Patriot interceptors produced, the PAC-3, number of THAADs. Those numbers, they're in the budget of the Department of War, Department of Defense. So they're not, we produce, let's see, what is it, roughly 600 missiles, or PAC-3 a year. THAADs, we do about 70. So, that's not a lot, but Iran hasn't been sitting around twiddling its thumbs. They have been building up for the next go round. They fully expect to be attacked again.
Yeah. And we just had on Professor Pape. He's a big believer that this is going to end up in a ground invasion. He says that there's such a trap at the moment, there's just no way they can get out of it. What's your thoughts on that? This may lead up to a ground invasion.
Did Professor Pape explain how the U.S. was going to assemble troops for a ground invasion?
Well, his view was that because of the scenario where there's no way out, you just can't get a deal. And so because you can't get a deal, you're going to slowly escalate towards a ground invasion. And so initially that'll be, as we know, the failed incursion in South Esfahan. So maybe something attempted similar to that, maybe in one of the islands. Although it will be a loss of life, this is just desperation after desperation, essentially.
I have a lot of respect for Professor Pape's analysis, but on this, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. So let's take the invasion of Iraq in 2003. We invaded with 165,000 troops. It took us 11 to 12 months to build those troops up, to move them forward to bases in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Once they're concentrated in those bases, back then we didn't have to worry about drone attacks. We didn't have to worry about short-range ballistic missiles. We didn't have to worry about intermediate ballistic missiles. Iraq had some Scuds, but they were not really weren't accurate. They were sort of an old generation. You put any concentration of troops within the missile range of Iraq, they're blown up before they get deployed. So, I mean, where do you deploy these guys in any kind of concentration? So similarly, let's say you're going to launch an attack with ground troops on Keshem or Karg Island. Okay, what what are you going to seize Karg Island with? A Ranger regiment. So then you start doing the math on how do you soldiers there? You're going to either fly them in on a helicopter, and the helicopters, depending, I think the Chinook can carry 25 soldiers combat loaded, or you drop them, have them airdrop, say 130. That gives you about 80. So just start doing the math. If you're going to just 500 guys wouldn't be enough to take and hold Karg Island at all. It'd just be a slot. So, but if you need 500 in a detachment to go on Karg Island, and so if you can take 90 per plane, you're going to need 6 of those planes. They become pretty easy targets for air defense, which Iran has shown they still have. So the thing reason I say a ground is really not light. You can do a special operations raid. The distinguish between that where you may try to send 60 to 80 guys to seize one particular site, maybe to try to scenario grab uranium, but even that is the logistics involved with the helicopters, being able to have enough personnel to carry out the mission. And then once they're on the ground, how long are they going to stay? How do you resupply them? You've got, have you ever got a gun? Or like a full semi-automatic M4 platform or M16? Have you ever shot one in Suleiman?
Sorry, what was that?
Have you ever shot an M4?
I haven't. Larry, I'm a nerd. I've read it. I've read it in a book. That's as far as I got.
Okay. So the discovery that carries you get a 30-round clip. You can go through that 30-round clip in about 30 seconds. And so let's say you need 10 300 rounds. Okay. Do you know how much that weighs? So all of a sudden you get into a weight issue. So then you get to you need to be supplied. How do the resupplies take place? With helicopter, with airdrops? So they're just. I'm not saying a ground operation is impossible, but there are a number of logistic problems that have to be solved. And in this combat environment, when you're dealing with Iran, which has a robust drone capability and has robust short-range, intermediate-range ballistic missiles, we don't have good defenses for that. And so any troops that land on the ground, they're going to be subject to that. So Keshem Island, they got 150,000 people there. How many soldiers are you going to land that can hold off 150,000 people? 10,000? 15, 20,000?
You need about half.
All of a sudden, the question is, how the hell do you get them there? If we were the Star Trek generation, we had the teletransporter, beam me up, Scotty. Okay, we could put them there immediately. Yeah, no problem. But we don't have that. So we're back to sort of, if you will, the 20th century technology of you got to fly on an airplane, you got to go on a boat, or you have to jump from a plane with a parachute. Those are the only 3 ways to search those positions.
But I guess the question here is, we are in agreement that the US is kind of in a very weak spot. We also believe that the US is going to escalate. And by escalate, we mean they're going to start their bombing campaign again. So they'll do their bombing campaign again. And either the result of that is going to be the same, or they're going to do better, right? Or worse. Now, unless they do better and they put Iran in a much more weaker spot, more of the same will just result in we're back in the same spot again. And so just like we always thought that things were going to get kinetic again, then the other option, you're back to the same option again. What happens? More of the same or escalate. And I guess that's where it comes to, like, where now you think that this hasn't worked. Now I try and escalate. Escalate is what? Either a nuclear bomb or ground invasion. And I think that, so what would you say would be the kind of roadmap in this scenario where we just get the end of the war or escalation?
Well, the problem is we have limited ability to escalate beyond it. Going nuclear, if we go nuclear, then we run the risk of going to nuclear war with Russia and China. So that, as Donald Trump said, that's off the table. That's not on the table. And I suspect that if he had a change of heart and tried to use a nuke, I think the military would move against him. They understand the risk attendant to that. That it would not, they would consider an unlawful order. One thing if we had been attacked with a nuke, but if Iran takes out one of our ships and then to try to rally the nuke, that is not. Remember, one of the reasons the Islamists in Iran do not want make it forbidden to use a nuke is because within Islam, and I'm not talking about the Wahhabi version, I'm talking about the Shia, both Shia and normal Sunni Muslim. Killing innocents is a sin. Killing combatants is okay, but you don't kill innocents. And the problem with the nuke is you're going to kill tens of thousands of innocents or hundreds of thousands. That's a violation. That's why I want to have. We have a history of killing innocents, unfortunately. We're not governed by any kind of moral code on that, despite, we like to pretend that we're different. But the conventional, the U.S. military right now, as it's configured, for what's called operations, where you use land, sea, air forces in combination in a coordinated movement. The problem now with Iran, though, is maritime's not an option. The ships have to stay far enough offshore that they're not vulnerable to the threats from drones and the cruise missiles, the anti-ship missiles that are on, and not to mention drones and the mini submarine. So right there, the maritime option is basically taken off the table. It's very, very constrained. You can launch aircraft from carriers that are 200 miles off, but once those planes fly 200 miles to shore, they got to be refueled because they only have a 500-mile radius, combat radius. It means if you've flown out 200 miles, you can do another 50, then you got to turn around and come back, or you're going to ditch that plane in the water. And so the maritime component's out. And as we just discussed, the ground component's not realistic. There is not a realistic scenario for using ground. And, Iraq found that out the hard way during the 9-year war with back in the 1980s. So these are air operations. Well, what are we operating with? Do we have an unlimited supply of Tomahawk missiles? No. Those inventories are down. The same with JASSMs. And this is one of the reasons that apparently the commander, he's called the Combined Forces Aviation Component Commander. He's in charge of all air operations, has advised against restarting any kind of bombing campaign or missile campaign against Iran. Because in doing so, one, the Iranians have improved their air defense systems in the intervening 6 weeks. They have done at least, 2 live tests over Tehran already. And then you're going to fire off missiles that, in theory, you may need them down the road to go to war with China, which is really what they want to do. And all of a sudden, you're going to further deplete your inventory, and the United States does not have a 24/7 switch that you can flip, that all of a sudden these factories will spring in and start churning out hundreds of these, as Russia did after the start of the 2022 special military operation. Russia had the industrial base to do it. The United States does not. And it's not, it's not my opinion. That's just an objective fact now.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, we also had a report today. This was from Iran's spokesperson. He said, if the US and Israel bomb this time, we're going to enrich uranium to 90%. They seem to be suggesting we'll get a nuclear bomb.
Well, that would, yes, that's what that would mean. But, I think that's more chest thumping. Because again, we get back to the Islamic, it's the Islamic Republic, and it is the Ayatollah Moshtaba Khamenei, as I had no sign that he's parted ways with his father and saying that, no, that would be haram, sin. But, again, Iran doesn't need to go that way. It's got plenty of firepower with the various ballistic missiles it has, so that it can punish both Israel, the Gulf Arabs, if they participated in this, and the United States. The air base in Jordan, Muwafiq al-Salti, that's going to be a big target. So this is, the military personnel that are involved with this in the planning cells and in the various operation centers that are set up to monitor the war. They're advising against it. So Trump has watched too many movies, and he thinks this is Hollywood. It's not Hollywood. There are practical logistics items that come to bear that you have to take into account. You can't ignore. So I agree. I think after Trump returns from China, unless there is some diplomatic breakthrough with the Chinese, where the Chinese convince Trump, give it up. Let's we'll stop the war and meet Iran's demands, and we'll ensure that Iran doesn't have a nuke. I think Trump's unlikely to take that as an option, but that would be the wise thing to do and to get out of this, because it's not the war, it's not the damage that's taking place on the battlefield or to the U.S., the devastation of U.S. military bases in the Gulf. It is the economic tsunami that's bearing down on the world right now. I just got a note from a friend about it here in the United States. Let me see if I can pull it up. Where are you? Suleiman. This is another. You got another Suleiman. Or actually, Suman. So for starter, the Mosaic Mining Company, they also are involved with fertilizers because they produce phosphate. So their CEO today said, to put it simply, he said in an earnings call, to put it simply, there's simply not enough phosphate to meet global demand. So, and then on top of that, he said his company reported a $373 million operating loss for the first quarter because of the surge in sulfur prices. That sulfur is one of the commodities that's no longer coming out of the Persian Gulf, and it represents a significant portion of the world sulfur content. And so here's one company already losing, basically, almost $500 million in just the first quarter. At Costco, if you're familiar with Costco and Walmart, they've just been informed by Mobil and Shell that they have no packaged product to send them for bare shelves. Where when you go into the Costco or Walmart and look for border oil, people like to change their own oil. Not available, and it's not going to be available for a while. The Toyota is about to release a service bulletin stating that you can temporarily use the 20 weight oil in lieu of 8 weight or 16 weight, because the Shell Pearl GTL facility at Ras Laftan, Qatar, is completely destroyed. It's all fly distance. So they're running out of that. So you start seeing this pile up in a whole variety of sectors. And it's these shortages that are going to, even though Donald Trump today basically said, I don't care about the economy, he's going to learn to care about it in the next week or so.
No doubt. Okay, one of the strand I want to talk to you about is Saudi Arabia. Reports came out today, Larry. Saudi Arabia carried out a covert attack on Iran during the war. It's now been revealed this is now Saudi along with the UAE who did that after claiming that they were neutral in this war. What's your thoughts?
Well, they claimed initially they were neutral, but Iran bombed them and bombed them repeatedly because they were involved. They were involved as a staging base. So, I think that's just news from a slow news day that is, trying to make a, I'll call it a mountain out of a molehill. Iran already realized that. And that's why they hit multiple facilities in Saudi Arabia and facilities in Oman, in UAE, and that's why just was it last Thursday they hit Fujairah port and knocked out what the last the last oil terminal that UAE still had operative for shipping oil out. So now UAE is out of cash flow from oil.
I guess I know what you're saying about Newsday, but we kind of always thought that Saudi and UAE's role, except for UAE, we knew about that, but Saudi's role was largely allowing the US to use its military base, allowing US to use its airspace, but Saudi taking progressive action against Iran. You think that's minor?
Yeah, the Saudi forces they're worthless.
I agree.
Not some power.
Was it even a Saudi in there? It was probably a Pakistani.
Yeah, or some other mercenary flying the aircraft. But again, they're restricted to. They're using they're not making their own bombs. Okay, so they're using the same stockpile as the United States. So every time they use it, that reduces the U.S. stockpile and depletes the inventory. And that's where China's happy to sit back and watch the United States spend all of its ordnance trying to attack Iran and not succeeding. Yeah, they've blown up hospitals, they've blown up schools, they've blown up some bridges, they've caused some damage, and they've killed people. But they have not weakened Iran militarily. And Donald Trump is listening to him talk about how the Iranian economy is devastated. And, oh my God, they're hanging on by a string. That's just nonsense. He doesn't know how to read a map. Pull the map out. What's to the north of Tehran? I'm doing a geography test with you. So what's to the north of Tehran?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
What is to the north of Tehran?
What do you mean in terms of from within Iran?
What's north of Tehran? Is Tehran blocked off from any kind of access to move goods in and out from the north?
No, it's not. It's got access through a wide range of ways. You've got either Pakistan, you've got Afghanistan, you've got a range of ways.
But to the north, what's to the north?
Sorry?
Caspian. What's to the north?
Oh, the north of Tehran is like the Caspian Sea, yeah.
Caspian Sea goes all the way to Russia, right? So they've got access there. Then there's this thing called a railroad that starts in China, goes all the way to Tehran, runs through Tashkent. They can haul things over the railroad and are. Then you've got the land routes from Pakistan, at least 7. Then there's this thing called airplanes, cargo airplanes. They fly in and out of Iran too, and have been doing so regularly over the last 6 weeks because of the ceasefire. So I said this notion that our blockade is so crippled Iran, they're on fumes, boy, they're begging for a way out. It's a lie.
Yeah, and one other question I got for you, Larry. What do you think? What do you think happens in these negotiations in China?
I think Trump is going with a whole set of assumptions that are not true. I think China is dependent upon the oil coming out of Iran. Is not. China has diversified its suppliers of oil over the last year, and actually predating that. One of their major suppliers now is Brazil. Brazil produces the same amount of barrels per day as Iran. So they've got a Brazilian supply. Then there's this country north of China, I think it's called Russia. Russia's got a lot of oil too that it's sending to China. So the notion that the Chinese are under such economic pressure, and for example, Trump may try to argue, well, you need our markets, you need us to buy your goods, and China basically going to say, no, we don't. We've actually diversified, so they're selling more of their products to the global south, and that's one of the elements in the Belt and Road Initiative, working more productively and investing in countries throughout Asia and Africa in particular. So the Chinese will be offering ways to exit the war with Iran, but understand China is backing Iran. They're not backing away. A friend of mine today sent me. He's got a friend that is in Beijing today, and he was driving down the road from the airport to the main city, and on all the light posts they have two flags hanging: the Chinese flag and the Iranian flag. Normally you'd put up U.S. flags. So far, they haven't gone out and replaced. As of today, they still have Iranian flags flying. Now, if they keep those up, I'll be curious to see if they do. That'll be sending a message to Trump too. Hey, we're back in Iran. We're not going to put your flag up on our poles. That would be an interesting message.
That'd be shocking to say the least. Larry, thank you so much for joining us. Always appreciate you having on. Everyone should be following your website, sonar21.com, and your Substack is also Sonar21, and obviously your X as well. We've got your X handle, which is Larry Sonar. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, sir. I always enjoy it, and hang in there.
Appreciate it as always. Thank you, Larry. You're our seventh interview of today, so I appreciate you.
Well, that's happy to accommodate you.
Thank you so much as always, Larry. That was Larry Johnson. Guys, make sure you follow Larry Johnson. If you're not following Larry Johnson, you're losing out in life. You need to be following him. You need to be subscribing to his Substack and go to his website. The guy is a legend. We always appreciate and love Larry Johnson. Like, comment, and subscribe to this interview. Subscribe. Okay. Guys, what we're going to do is, well, that was the seventh interview. I mean, so annoying that there was technical issues. Though. That's kind of annoying me that today. I don't get why, because we had the interviews earlier on and they were fine. So I don't get what's going on. So what we're going to do is, what shall we do? Shall we wrap up? You want to go back on the space and switch to the other channel? What do you want to do? What shall we do? I think, okay, there are people on the space, so let's switch to the other channel. Okay, I'm gonna go on the space and then we're gonna switch to the other channel. Okay, we'll just switch to the space. Actually, let me just put the space on here. It's fine. But then you guys were saying there's audio issues, so I don't know. Let me try it. Anyway, let's get on the space. Guys, how's it going? Let's go to. Brilliant. Let's go to. Let me just get this sorted. Okay, let me put the X space on. Although I think there'll probably be issues with this, but that's how it goes.
Loved it. Time is brilliant, and he was giving you a bit of a geography lesson while we were there. What's to the north of Tehran? What's to the west? What's to the south? What river falls in between? It's just like, whoa.
Every time.
It's brilliant. And he was giving you a bit of a geography lesson while we were there. What's to the north of Tehran? What's to the west? What's to the south?
That was
What
listening to
river
yourself,
falls
which is
in
probably a
between?
horrible
It's just
sight.
like, whoa.
The
Nice.
So what was your thoughts
What's
about
that?
Professor Paper? That was an awesome interview. That was.
Nothing. I'm just
I can hear some noise in the background.
So
Yeah, it was good.
that was listening to yourself, which is probably a horrible sight. The
So nice. 60% chance.
So
That's crazy.
what was your thoughts about Professor
So
Paper?
you
That was
definitely
an
spent
awesome
a lot of
interview.
time
That was.
doing research on him because I think he was a bit surprised. Yeah, it was that you
good.
knew that he was pressed to ask what percentage chance there was of a ground invasion. I think
Cool.
he thought the 60% chance. That was crazy. So you definitely spent a lot of time doing research on him because I think he was a bit surprised that you knew that he was pressed to ask what percentage chance there was of a ground invasion. I think it's 60, he said, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. Do you know what? I just hope that, I mean, Professor Pape sounds so like researched and knowledgeable, on and so confident on what he's saying. Oh God, Doc's giving Doc. I'm only just repeating what he said. Don't give me thumbs down, dude. That I just hope that he's as confident as he is that he's not right because I don't want a ground invasion. I think this thing needs to be over like yesterday. Jump in, Doc. What are your thoughts?
I thought, I've had a lot of schooling, had a lot of professors. This guy was, to me, is the classic, professorial type. Was all theory, no practice. Larry Johnson, I think, put, him in his place, not directly or intentionally, but in terms of discussing an escalatory trap. I mean, some of the justification the professor used was sort of ridiculous. One is you can always quit and walk away. That's usually the way wars end. Okay. Vietnam is a horrible example, which is one that he gave it. He said there won't be a straight line, 500,000 American troops on the ground. It'll go up, it'll go down. Pretty much what we've been doing so far. And that's what happened in Vietnam. 5 years, Paris, peace talks. Nothing happened. But the world wasn't strangled economically by the continuing war in Southeast Asia like it is now with oil and gas, fertilizer, phosphates, sulfur, all of it. The world is economically is going to ground to a halt. And Americans are not going to stand for boots on the ground. There's not a chance. The most politically aware of segment of our society right now is 25 and unders because they're the ones who are going to be called to draft. We couldn't put 160,000 men there. And Larry Johnson was right. There's no way to protect the presence there. Forget about getting there, which is a big problem. But once they get there, how do they defend themselves? And beyond that, what's to stop Iran now that all the radars are destroyed? Right? They can move all the carriers they want in the area, but they can't protect them. They can't open the strait. There's no answer, no defense, as Larry Johnson put it, to the drones and missiles advantage. The the U.S. can say, and people can believe that this airlift that's been going on the last 30 days somehow put America in a position militarily that they haven't been in before, and it weren't in from the moment hostilities started. Before there was a depletion of missiles, ships, planes. It was before this failed attempt to capture the uranium. And who knows how many Americans died? We know the loss of planes. And now the mainstream media, and to the extent that Trump has any support here left for this, now the mainstream media, CNN, NBC, and others are covering just how disastrous this has gone militarily so far. You have any number of generals who have already quit or have been fired. And what I hear from San Diego, my friends that are in the military down there up at Camp Pendleton, the largest Marine base, maybe in the country, certainly on the West Coast, is that morale could not be worse because they see being sent onto Carg Island or any other small piece is a death trap. And there's no supply lines, right? Like Larry Johnson didn't use that term, but that's what I was thinking when he was saying, well, how are we going to get how are we going to get munitions, so on and so forth? And what do you do about the standing Iranian army? Let's assume for a second that the quote unquote the Iranian Navy has been destroyed, which I think is a lie that Trump's told. Their Air Force, too, has not been destroyed. They didn't have a huge presence in terms of planes, and that's what Trump's talking about. But an Air Force reasonably has to include missiles and drones, and particularly drones now. So I don't see how this is an escalatory trap, because I agree with Larry Johnson. There's no way for America to really escalate this. So I'll end there. I know you've been on the space for a long time.
Appreciate that, Doc.
Person number two. Then.
No, fine. I was gonna go to Cyrus. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was actually gonna say something and go to Jonah because Jonah was giving hundreds. Professor, when I asked about how Professor Pape's interview was, I was gonna say, Doc, look, you know what the thing is. Everything you say, I'm not a military person, but everything you say makes complete logical sense. However, Professor Pape did advise many American governments on strategy. Right up until this government, he seems to have a lot of knowledge on the budget spent
Yeah.
by this.
How has our war strategies gone?
Interrupt you.
In the last 30 years.
You're not doing this to me. I did not interrupt you. I sat here and I listened to your
Oh, I'm
10
sorry. I
minute long.
thought we were having a conversation. My apologies.
Yeah, we are, but we have to let each other talk when we have a conversation, right? So you just said he just sounds like a normal professor, and I'm saying to you that he's got that practical experience, which he said. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I don't think Trump gives a toss about morale. So that's it. I won't say anything more than that. Let's go to Joa because I'd rather just not. I mean, we've been going at this for hours and I don't really want to have a heated debate with you. I thought I'd just get to land my point. Cyrus, don't even try it. I'm going to
Mine
Joa.
was going to continue on what Doc said, but it's okay. Whatever you and Suleiman want.
Cyrus, I just said I'm going to Joa. Am I speaking freaking Japanese?
Cyrus, let her.
Joa jumping
She
in.
loves me. She wants to come to me first. Cyrus, let
Go,
her.
go.
Oh, don't even push your luck now, Jonah.
Look, I think I actually really liked Professor Pape, but he's looking at it from a strategist point of view, right? I'd be really curious, and as Salman was interviewing him, great interview by the way, and yeah, it did really flow really well. I hope you have him back on the show. Um, he I can't find anywhere why he thinks we're there, right? I'd be really interested to know why he thinks we're there, right? Because we had on the show right before, we had Ryan, who, to me is the everything is Israel guy. Then you have the professor, which is everything is strategy. And then you have Larry, which is everything is what we've done in the past in my experience. So what I know from the past is what we'll do in the future. And that's kind of the way I look at it. And it's really good perspectives to look at things, right? But, when Ryan says it's not the petrodollar, for example, well, we know from Hillary Clinton in Libya that we were there because of the petrodollar. The example he uses about, look at Iran, we went there in the 90s. Well, they were trying to nationalize their oil. So, yes, they were trying to get off the petrodollar back in the 90s, although he then said we're getting off the petrodollar in the 2000s. When you nationalize your resource, many times you get off the oil, or else that becomes, a weapon in your centralized bank. When it came to Pape, I agree with everything he said, except the only reason why I'd be really curious to know what his theory is of why we're there is because he says 70% or 60% boots on the ground. Well, to me, if we go boots on the ground, I'm going to concede that we are controlled by Israel, because I don't see what point that serves. Because if we're there to protect the petrodollar, we don't need to do boots on the ground. We can just suffocate the trade. We can attack all the ghost ships. We can make sure that there's no ships that are trading outside the dollar, because we'll take the ships before they go anywhere. things of that nature, right? So there's no need for boots on the ground in order to enforce the sanction, which would keep the petrodollar in place. But the only reason why people can trade outside the petrodollar currently was because of Venezuela and because of Iran. Because the way it works is, you need to spend if France buys cogs from China in yuan, and now they have yuan in their reserves. What are they going to spend the reserve? What are they going to spend it on? They're not probably going to buy Chinese bonds, but now they can buy oil in yuan, and that way they don't mind trading in yuan because they have something else they can spend it on if they have a surplus or vice versa. And that's why Iran and Venezuela are very dangerous to the U.S. system. If we have boots on the ground, then there's some other motive. And if there's some other motive, to me, it's only that Israel has pressured us to go there. And yeah, we are a lapdog for Israel. We're not just listening to lobbyists sometimes and have some power over Israel. Well, I don't think we do. I don't think Pape has that stance. Pop has that stance. That's why I'd be interested why he's there. As for Larry Johnson, Larry's awesome,
Bro,
really
why do you
caring
keep
Larry.
calling him Pape like he's
I know.
some
I kept saying
Portuguese
Pop.
guy?
No, because there's Pape, the
Irhan
Israeli
Pap. Yeah, yeah,
historian. Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry. How do you pronounce it? Is it Pop?
Just Pape.
Pape. Okay, Pape. Very American.
He's
Pape.
American. He's not some Portuguese guy, Joe.
Yeah, but Pape is very weird. By the way, with this whole Portuguese thing, Portugal announces that Netanyahu will be arrested and cannot use the airspace over Portugal. And Mario Nafal, Ian Miles Chong, and a bunch of other ones start posting up stuff about, how Portugal's being invaded by migrants. Meanwhile, we have the lowest rate in all of Europe of illegal immigrants, right? And all of them today, all of them at the same time started posting stuff about Portugal. I'm like, there is no way. Oh, and Israel doesn't want Kanye to perform in Portugal either, apparently. So they're spending money making ads against it. So these people, I now have no doubt, gets Israeli money, like zero doubt, because they all posted at the same time, all with the same subject matter, all different posts, but all same subject matter. Right. And I always had my doubts whether Mario did or not. Maybe he's just stuck in the middle because he tries to play both sides, blah, blah, blah. But I have no doubt now when this post came out and you look at the time difference between him and Ian Miles Chong pushing propaganda from the same source with different stories, but basically the same thing. The migrants are taking over Portugal. Nothing could be further from the truth. Just to bring up the whole Portugal thing, not to derail the space anyway. But yeah, great job today, Solomon.
Appreciate it, Joe. Great points. Yeah, I think I don't agree with Pape's kind of timeline. I don't think it's going to be like 4 weeks. Sorry, like a month. But I do think that logically speaking, there is going to be some kind of ground incursion. Now, I know I predicted last time and they failed in the South Isfahan, and I still think that they will be because just like logic, unless Trump, bends the knee, makes the deal, I just can't see him doing that though. So in the end, when he doesn't do that, then the only other result is escalation. Once you try, he's going to try more of the same first though, and then when that fails, then he's going to be left in again deal, spend more time building up, but now you're completely almost out of weapons, or escalation. And I think that's when once he gets down back to that same conundrum, like as in what is he going to choose, then the ground incursion becomes more likely because the alternative is a deal. And the deal is possible, but I think at the moment they're so far apart. And I mean, how can they get close? And what I mean by that is, how can Trump allow Iran to control the Strait, and how can Iran give it up? Now, the deal could be like some kind of middle of the way, but we'll have to see on that. Because how would you know how bad it look on Iran now to give, like, for example, Saudi and UAE control over the Strait when they were bombing them? Yeah, so those are interesting points. Cyrus, you wanted to jump in. What was your thoughts?
Hey, Suleiman, great interviews. Awesome
I
all
asked you a
around.
question. I asked you a question for you.
What do I think of what specifically, Pape?
No, no, I said I asked the question that you
Oh
wanted me
yes,
to
yes.
ask
Thank
you.
you for that. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. And I'm sure he was a little surprised. He doesn't like to be confronted with percentages he gives out, but he was honest. I think it was a great introductory interview. Later on, I'd like to see you press him more. He's a realist, but I think there's a bit of kind of rhetoric in his analysis, and I'll break it down here shortly. And also, I think that the term escalation trap. It's not a new theory. It's a new definition he coined within escalation theory and military escalation dominance theory. So his analysis overall is great, I think, but his conclusions are wrong, and he oversimplifies it. If you next go around, I'd like you to press him on the influence of APAC and this being Israel's war. I want him to admit that. People in his school of thought, for me, the authority is John Mearsheimer. He travels extensively to talk to leaders around the world. Unfortunately, our leaders don't like to talk to realists, and even Professor Pape, he was advising Ron Paul, who I love. Ron Paul, these institutional creatures that like Ted Cruz and Donald Trump's and Obama's. They don't talk to very the smartest of the group, right? Because it goes against the deep state hegemonic strategy. So Pape is in the school of realism, but I think he's off base here. I give it a 5% chance that we'll take any islands. If we are going to take some islands, it will be the three that are contested by the UAE, the Abu Musa and the Greater Tomb and the smaller one. So those are, and it would serve zero strategic value. I even give it less than a 5% chance, realistically, probably like 1%. So I think he's off base there. What I didn't like, he mentioned
But
us
you
running
think
out of.
just on that one, so that one is because you think I just want to welcome Simon as well. You think that there'll be a deal, right? Is the only way you don't think that,
No,
right?
I've been predicting a frozen conflict. As came out with that a week before John
So
Mearsheimer came out. Like I
frozen,
posted it.
frozen conflict, as in like there's not going to be any kind. Yeah, because you don't think there's going to be any kind of kinetic action, right?
There's not going to be any like we saw in the main engagement in the 39 days. No, we will see similar stuff as we saw the UAE get hit and a couple ships get pushed off, or maybe
Okay,
the skirmishes. Like low intensity, small
fair
scale.
enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, and they'll negotiate. They're going to take the off ramp. Trump has to take the off ramp. I mean, there's major issues that are happening in India and Pakistan, Thailand. The austerity measures are already in place. But what I
Mm,
didn't like, he talked about B-52s carpet bombing from 50,000 feet. Any Air Force specialist would laugh about that. I've also spoken to O6 colonels about this stuff. I've had a lot of opportunity to talk to folks. There's not going to be any carpet bombing in any military any potential conflict. The U.S. can produce up to 50,000 JDAMs a year, not to mention laser guided munitions. So
mm.
there's not going to be a shortage of those weapons. What there's going to be a shortage of is JASSMs and Tomahawks, the standoff weapons, especially most importantly the interceptors. Which the Gulf is already out of. A crazy statistic is the GCC.
Cyrus, but did he say carpet bomb? I didn't hear carpet bomb. I heard
He said
bomb.
he said B-52 is flying at 50,000 feet with dumb bombs. That's what that
Yeah,
means.
but that's not carpet bombing.
Well, that's my definition of it. When heavy bombers drop an entire load of ordnance, 80,000 pounds of dumb bombs, that constitutes carpet bombing. But in any event, I don't want to get into the semantics of that. And then so the GCC spent the same more
I mean,
Pac
I
three
think
interceptors.
just on
Mhm.
that dumb bomb, like I guess I can see why both of you are right because you're essentially, throwing unguided explosives from the air. You're just causing major explosions. You're gonna kill a huge amount of civilians. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Exactly. That's not in play. We will never, and it won't serve any strategic or tactical purpose. Also, he said if there's mass Iranian casualties, which there already have been, there'll be increased chance of terrorism. Iran has never prescribed to that type of defense. That's a Salafi, Wahhabi kind of like ISIS type, Al Qaeda type mentality who oppose the Shias. They have a mortal battle they have going on. So there's Iran's never sent one suicide bomber anywhere, right? So that is sensationalism, and also it's so if you go check out. His latest post, he said that Iran has enough plutonium for 200 bombs. Scott Ritter ripped him. You should read Scott Ritter's reply to him. So, there is a bit of sensationalism. Iran doesn't have a reprocessing capacity, and they can't really get it at all. So that post he made is sensational. I think he's riding his wave of popularity. That I think there's an element of that. He wants to get super famous, but he is very smart. His overall realist theories are on point. In this case, I think either he's off base on purpose or he wants to create a little sensationalism because it's everything. The waters are so murky. No one can come out and say, "Oh, I was right. I was wrong." I'm making some bold predictions. But this is a highly complex situation of epic magnitude that's going to have implications globally, and this is a historic event. So most of us realize it here on the panel, but the listeners, I just want to implore you to dig into the details and realize this is unprecedented, and these are major shifts in global power. And to that end, he predicted in 2-3 years, Iran, 1 to 2 years, Iran would rise to, a fourth power, global power. I think that will take place if there's no deal reached, right? That would take place over a period of 10 to 20 years, in my estimation, and that will conclude when BRICS reaches maturity. BRICS is in its infancy right now, right? So when the global South, when there's that clear fissure, when you can see a clear division in the global South and the global North, then you'll see Iran emerge as a fourth pole, you can say, but a minor power at that. It'll never be the same capacity as China or Russia even, but nevertheless, because of the Strait of Hormuz, and I agree, Iran will probably go nuclear in the next 2 years. I 100% agree with them. If a deal is not reached, Iran has no choice to go nuclear. I give a 70 to 90% probability Iran will either be an undeclared nuclear power like Israel, or they'll full on come out with a test. But they won't do it until they have at least 10 or 12 warheads, which is they have the amount enriched currently, because it's very dangerous to just come out with one weapon, right? You want to have a clear deterrence, and it needs to be miniaturized to be able to put on a warhead. So those are multiple phases they need to go through. I give it about 2 years, but I'm hoping a deal is reached. It was somehow that I'm wrong. I'm praying I'm wrong because the implications are so dire, and Iran is a natural ally of the U.S., as is Russia, right? So for us to have a future as continuing with our power, projection capability and or the current power that the U.S. holds, we need to make friends with Russia and Iran, like not best friends, but we need to have lukewarm relations at least. And this deal would be the first step towards that. So it would be momentous and huge, but unfortunately, because of the Israel lobby and how much they've invested over the last 30 years, I just don't see it happening. I'll end it there.
Thanks, Cyrus. Andy, do you want to jump in, and then I want to go to Simon? Oh no, and that girl's here as well. Go ahead, Andy.
MAG is now posting, Saudi Arabia launches missile strikes into Iran. FAFO happening now. And it's reports that Saudi Arabia joined the UAE in their covert attacks on Iran back in March. So MAG is so desperate for a victory, they're reporting on something that happened back in March. But if it's true that Saudi Arabia really did do that, Iran is not going to go easy on them next time around. And this is what I'm keep going back to. Iran needs to freaking have the Houthis close off the Red Sea already. Saudi Arabia is still making money on oil, and Saudi Arabia needs to be choked out economically. So they're to put the pressure on them, because right now they're just still getting like 2/3 of their oil out at higher prices. So they're actually making more money on oil than they were before the war. It's completely ridiculous. And going to a ground invasion, yeah, we all know there's never going to be some massive troops and hundreds of thousands of men going into Iran. We've established since day one that that's just impossible. You can't even stage them because of the missiles and drones. But I could see Trump being desperate enough to try to take an island, even though there's no way to protect those troops. And I think Trump doing that could actually expedite the end of the war, because he wouldn't be able to cover up thousands of Marines dying on an island. And the second news of that reaches the United States, people will be out on the streets in mass. I think even in the millions, like people would just, with the high prices, everyone would just erupt onto the streets. And that's what ended the Vietnam War. They would have been happy in the Vietnam War to keep that going for 5 more years, sacrifice tens of thousands of more Americans. But it was the protest that eventually ended it, and the political pressure. So if, like, let's say 1,000 Americans died on one of these islands and that reached home, people would be like, what the heck is going on? We went from 13 Americans dead, even though obviously we know it's a lot more, to, let's say, 1,000. People would just be out on the streets, and I think that would actually force Trump to accept Iran's terms, or at a minimum, more people would just be awakened to how much Israeli control there is. Like, obviously, I hope it doesn't get to that point and Trump just signs the deal, but something's going to have to give. And I think Trump is just so desperate to make something happen, he's going to do something stupid like that. I mean, he brought in what is it, the Boxer and the Tripoli, and I don't think he just brought them in to do a few raids on Iranian vessels with his stupid blockade. So something's going to happen, but that will just wake a lot of people up who haven't been paying attention, that are indifferent, because you can't cover up a failed amphibious invasion of some island. That's something you can't cover up, unlike the Isfahan invasion.
Thanks. Who else wanted to? Let's go to anybody. I can't see anybody's hands, by the way, just to let you know.
I just want to push back a little bit on Andy just for 2 seconds. Andy, unfortunately, the way the American military and the way we behave, if we lose even 500 soldiers, we double down, right? So before it gets to a point where people are on the streets, we're going to lose thousands of soldiers. So generally, the military, we never back down. That's just the American way. That's how superpowers act. Russia too. Look at the Afghan experience. Any superpower will not walk out right after a mass casualty event. In fact, they usually double down, which is it's a scary thought, right? So I hope that we're wise enough not to deploy troops to any island, and I think that our generals know that. I think they're pushing back so hard. Trump just hasn't. If Trump, it was up to him, he would have done it, because he doesn't know better. But I think we have a lot of brilliant folks that they actually get educated under folks like Professor Pape. A lot of the military academy folks get sent to get their masters under folks like, I mean, he talked about it actually. So a lot of these general officers come from that school of thought. They're realists, right? So they're not going to just send our soldiers to die, without major pushbacks. I just don't think Trump's going to have an easy time selling that in the Pentagon, let alone to Congress.
Simon, thanks for joining. Hope you're doing well. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, hey Solomon. I was just going to comment briefly on what Joe was saying and like Ryan Dawson's commentary. Yeah, I think like to ignore the entire history of like U.S. foreign policy, in terms of the capital markets and the history of the dollar is like real big mistake. Because to think that these wars don't have a strategic goal for U.S. capital markets and the dollar, is just really far from reality. I think Joe did say that about Libya. I mean, Hillary Clinton said that the final nail was that Libya was succeeding as economy. It was kicking ass, like it was building massive gold reserves. It was using its gold. It had a central banking system that was independent and working. It had its own oil. It nationalized its oil. It did a pan Arab movement as well as a pan African movement. And it was going to create a currency that would unify like 15 African states and nations. Um, to come off the French franc, and the sheer the number one tool for colonization was always currency war. The transatlantic slave trade started as a currency war. You destroy the value of the currency, you steal the assets, you rape, pillage, and then you bring home a load of slaves and get them to build America, and Europe. Like every single war, even the Iran war, like the most recent one, a currency war was always preceded. And so the entire US strategy is to prevent competition, install the puppets, and then those puppets price their goods in dollars, and then they have to lend that money back to the US government. And that created all the growth of the US economy. And that's what gives it its world reserve currency status. So like, yeah, to say like that's got nothing to do with it, and it's just someone else telling them to go to war, like just really ignores how the American empire succeeded. And yeah, Hillary
And how
Clinton.
every leak, yeah, and how every leak from WikiLeaks showed us that that's why we were there. From Syria to Libya to even past invasions in South America. Right? I
Yeah,
mean, we have the evidence that this is how we act.
yeah, and those are WikiLeaks. Those aren't like CIA documents or anything like that. It's WikiLeaks. I mean, some could say the WikiLeaks might be CIA influence, but yeah, Hillary Clinton specifically stated that she got the memo that the biggest problem with Gaddafi, despite all the cooperation he did to try and fend off the Western destabilization campaigns, the nail too far was creating a gold-backed currency to unify Africa around its resources. That's a big problem. Uh, so yeah, just wanted to add that. The other thing I'd add on the lobbying conversation. Here's the challenge to overcome with lobbying. Um, it's one thing just getting a bunch of people to contribute money and rely upon people's charitable donations for a cause. It's another thing, the way that lobbying actually works, which is that you've got business interests that can make billions and billions of dollars through influencing policy. And they do quick calculations that if they buy X politicians, then they have a budget for lobbying of whatever amount they need, whether it's hundreds of millions or billions. And then they spread it across and they give all the politicians specific goals. And they start with small amounts and say, right, I need you to get me to make this happen, and then over time they become um, they become reliable at achieving the goals set by the business, and then they give more and more money. But the calculation of business lobbying is that if I contribute $1 billion, I'm expecting 100 billion in return. So they want 100x return on their investment, otherwise they wouldn't contribute. And so the reason that the biggest lobbies are the insurance companies, the banks, the tech companies, the military companies, and you go all the way down, is because they get a return on investment. So they're not contributing because they care about America. They're not contributing because they care about a cause. And when there is a return on investment, unless you can create a competing model, you'll never be able to compete with that firing power. And the system will always be corrupt. And it was designed that way from day one, because those that designed the system were the elites that wanted to do that, from day one. And so, in order to succeed in the lobbying and political game, you have to align with the business interest, and you have to create a model where you achieve their business strategic goals, which means that we need to make it more profitable to not support all the things you don't want the government to support. And sadly, that ties into the actual structure of the economy and the petrodollar, which is that you need to sell more bonds, you need the money to go up in the stocks, and you need to strengthen the dollar, and you keep going until the empire can no longer do it anymore, in which case everyone runs away. And that's just the reality. So lobbying, trying to compete with business lobbies through just charitable donations, and if Dan gets in, he has to become useful to business, or he doesn't progress in his career. And he'll find that out as soon as he gets in the system. Just want to say that anyway.
Yeah, Simon, did you know that we discussed this earlier, but actually the head in the video is going now. Apparently Trump picked him up.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, probably one of the most important people to be there. So
Yeah, exactly. We were like, what's going on? Nasser taking the Chinaman to China. What is going on? He's literally the bridge. If there's any evidence that there's like, yeah,
and the most important thing, if we could just summarize it, there's a lot of things, but if we could summarize this into one thing, this is semiconductor chips and their importance to the AI and robotics, and that is pretty much everything, and everything that goes behind that, and all the energy that needs to power it.
yeah, great point, Simon. Um, let's go to what you call it again, that girl.
Thank you so much for giving me the mic. Hope everybody's having a good night. I caught your Larry Johnson interview, which of course is very good. I love Larry Johnson. I love when you two talk because you guys share so much information. I didn't catch the Pape interview yet, but I will go back and look at it because it sounds pretty interesting. And he sounds like my kind of guy because I am one of those who is like, we're going full steam ahead. so I want to hear the evidence for why he thinks that. I just say it from a feeling, and I want to hear the evidence for why he says that. And then I just want to ask Simon. I just heard everything you said about, like war, the dollar and these wars propping up the dollar and everything, which I do agree with, right? But there was a time where you were saying, oh no, we're going to pull away from these kind of like war economy. America's part of the negotiations in the background to pull away from the war economy and be more of a regional power and everything else or whatever. And I remember you were saying that. So then I figured if they were going to do that back then, they must have had a plan to still have some sort of money and be able to do that. So I don't understand like why now, like that's still the most important thing if before it wasn't the most important thing for us to be, like in any kind of war. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like if you were saying before that they were pulling away from war economy and there was other ways to make money, which there are, right? So like I just still don't see how the propping of the dollar is like priority number 1, 2, or 3 for them. I think that there's other things at play here, and I don't think that it's the priority because if it was, they wouldn't be doing this in the first place. Because like we can already tell, the empire is going to sink eventually because of this. So I just was wondering how we kind of get there
Yeah,
to
sure.
here.
I didn't say America's pulling away from the military economy. I was saying that it's pulling out from the Middle East because China's the new is going to turn the Middle East into West Asia, and transnational and the war is going to come home, and so it's going to be internal civil unrest. It's going to be the prison economy, the police and surveillance state within America, Europe, UK. It's going to be Central and South America, and it's going to be continual escalation in Europe. And that's the area where the military can make up for lost profits as a result of um, the splitting the world up into regional areas. And so, as part of that, you need a transition away from America creating the forever war in the Middle East and moving to the rebuild phase. And so you use war in order to get as many investments in the Middle East as possible. And then you get as many investment contracts, which are effectively why you've got all these people going to China to negotiate how they're going to split up all these rebuild contracts and investment contracts. And the Gulf Sovereign Wealth Funds will be splitting up how, the world based upon how they rebuild the Middle East. That was kind of the theory. The reason it's changing now is because of China. And so transnational capital, which controls America, in my mind, is now hedging and preparing for a multipolar world, as well as a global police and surveillance state. And so they're building out that. And so America as a country is something that transnational capital doesn't is hedging away from, and building financial centers all around the world and adjusting to a new multipolar reality. And part of that is asset stripping the West and making up for lost profits in the Middle East at home.
Yeah, but I don't think so. You need an Iran war where you can't come out of it to do that. Like that's what I'm saying. Like going into Iran, I don't even know how Trump is going to get out. I'm also again of the Pape mindset of like we're going in full steam ahead. So I just don't see how that like you could. I definitely believe we're going to go multipolar for sure, but I just can't see where the war fits in for just for that reason being like priority number 1. But again, my mindset is that somehow America thinks under this doctrine, Trump has agreed to, and these are the adults in the White House, so I'm putting it on them, that they can go into Iran and have this regime change, balkanize Iran, and be able to take their uranium and everything else and do whatever they want there, which is not going to happen. So I, I just see this
Yeah,
more
I
as
think
a speed bump
I think
than anything
American
else.
yeah, I think American intelligence know that. Most people like their commentary is that America doesn't know this and Trump's an idiot. I don't think that's what's happening. I think Trump is delivering exponential profits to transnational capital right now. A crisis is needed in order to implement this global reset that leads to this multipolar world and this negotiation. And I believe a deal will be done with Iran when they're ready. When they're ready to announce it, and a lot of what we're witnessing in this war is strategic goals that the global leaders have determined are the right way of doing this. This isn't. I don't. Yeah, it's to me. I can see very strategic goals being achieved here, and I don't think Iran's like. I don't think they're gonna. You know, Iran will be Iran, and Iran's agreed. I personally think Iran's agreed to the end result of this.
Simon, what does the U.S. leaving the Middle East look like
If
to
I could
you?
just say one more thing to him, Cyrus, because
Please, please
I
do.
don't, yeah, just
Please.
one more thing. Only because I live in America and I see the rhetoric here when it comes to war with Iran. Now, I'm going to bring in Israel not as the scapegoat at all. I want to be very clear. But you have to understand that for people here and this fifth column that we have, I'm not saying all of these kind of people, but it is imperative that, Israel is safe and things like that. So I just don't understand how we'll be able to pull out with Iran still being a threat to Israel. And they will continue to think that Iran is a threat to Israel. Because remember, before all of this, and I'm almost done, Cyrus, before all of this, the agenda, the goals were we need to go into Iran, stop their nuclear powers, take all their weapons, ballistic missiles and everything else, and shut down their proxy operation, which none of which has been done. So this is why I don't see how Trump just makes a backhanded deal and walks out. And by the way, I don't think that Trump is stupid and doesn't know that he can't do this. And they have fired people who were telling them that they shouldn't be doing this in the first place. They know they can't do it, but they never stop them from doing certain things anyway. So I think that's really the point that I'm making, is that this does not seem strategic at all for America, even to build the dollar. So yeah.
It doesn't build the dollar. It's not strategic for America. It is very strategic for oil companies, military companies, tech companies, banks, financial institutions, and that's why the stock market's at new all-time highs. It's very strategic, and it is working perfectly.
Okay, because you were saying to prop up the dollar earlier in the conversation, so that's why I said that. Thank you for
They're
your
sacrificing the dollar, and I think that's part of a negotiation between transnational capital and China.
Simon, you mentioned the U.S. leaving the Middle East. What does that entail, and like, what does that exactly look like to you? Like when the dust settles.
It means that everything's genuine defense contracts rather than attack military forever war models, which means that you need to regime change Israel. You need to have Iran where there's not strategic tension between Israel and Iran. And it means that you stop you stop funding military bases in order to agitate the region. And instead, you just actually get rebuild contracts. You build gas pipelines, and you get as many economic incentives for American companies. And you tie that together with China, and you create effectively what China's vision is, which is normalization between Iran and the GCC. No more proxies, resistance, and genuine economic integration, and a regime changed Israel that's no longer used to receive US military budgets to agitate the region.
And how long do you think this will take, that trend to complete?
I think it started in 2000. with the assassination of Qasem Soleimani under Trump administration 1. And I think it's quite advanced now. And I think within definitely the next 5 years, we'll know exactly what it looks like. But I think you'll see significant progression towards it every year from here on in. And I think all the military action is to pave the way for that vision. The ports that are needed, the rebuild contract, the data centers, the Build Back Better contracts, the Halliburton contracts, the Chevron Exxon partnerships. All of these wars are really paving what needs to be rebuilt in order to move to a regionally stable Middle East where America no longer agitates the region and just brings the war back home instead.
Yeah, that is a lofty order. I hope it happens. I mean, I sure pray for that, but I think the U.S. will double down. I think the GCC will further fracture. The UAE's charting their own path, getting more buddy with the U.S. and being the favorite stepchild. And we're going to double down. I think we're going to rebuild some of
What
those
about the other
military
side of that?
bases.
Look at the other side of all the US UAE deals. You got both sides being done. So you got the FX swap line, which is integration with the Fed system, while building the Enbridge central bank digital currency network, which circumvents SWIFT, while leaving OPEC, which breaks the other part of the petrodollar, 11 months before announcing that the new energy agreements will be done via the BRICS corridor. Doing hosting deals with Putin and Russia, while also hosting deals with America. Funding basically the destabilization of Europe and UK with anti-Islam propaganda that leads to all the millionaires and billionaires moving over to UAE, while simultaneously hosting COP contract. If you look at all the different deals, they're all hedging every single bet, not knowing which one's going to work.
But for those bets to pay out, the U.S. needs to be present militarily and provide that security umbrella for the GCC. I mean, there's no way we're going to leave the Middle East. I mean, in our lifetime, it's not going to
The
happen in
bit
our
that I
lifetime.
think clicks for me is when you realize how much UAE helps Iran and how much those anti-sanction networks work through UAE. Then you realize how they're all plugged together. And that kind of to me, when you look at what UAE is and what they're building and all the financial layers, you realize that UAE is one of the most significant helpers to Iran.
Yeah, I mean, due to the Islamic banking system and just the opaque way
Not
UAE
Islamic
does it.
banking, no, just so you can circumvent US
No,
sanctions.
I'm familiar with it.
You,
I know what they do, but I mean that is a function of the sanctions. I mean that's a minuscule amount of revenue for the UAE. I mean they have a ginormous GDP for their population. So
no,
that's why.
it plugs it all together. Once you could go from dollars to gold in UAE, and then you can go from gold to discounted oil via Iran through to China, and you plug it into SIPs. You've got the entire workaround for the Switzerland of the Middle East. The and and that's all built.
Yeah, Dubai's been doing that, and also they have long ties with Iran. The first phases of development for the UAE in the 70s and 80s was mostly Iranian businessmen doing it, and then U.S. and the UK were the leaders. Now it's China and India, mainly India. So I mean, the UAE's gone through phases, but those Iranian roots run deep. I mean, they've always had those relationships, but they've never been strained like this. And I'm surprised they haven't frozen more assets. I think they froze some assets, so that it goes to give credence to what you're saying, Simon. Those relationships run deep. And the UAE doesn't, although in rhetoric they are, completely antagonistic towards Iran and carrying the American party line, the Trump party line. So I mean, there is a lot of truth to what you say. I'm not discounting the intricacies of the financial system in Dubai and the importance of it. I've always said Dubai is way more than just a gas pump, right? As some Westerners crudely put it, the UAE has become a bona fide global financial hub. So there's a lot of truth and facts there. It's just what we what we disagree on is what we predict, and or no one has a crystal ball, but I just don't see the U.S. leaving the Middle East. In fact, I think they'll double down. I don't think the Fifth Fleet will come back in the same way they did. America may move CENTCOM to Israel, but they will definitely project power with their bases in the UAE and Saudi. They're not going anywhere, and Qatar for that matter. Unless we are completely falling apart as a superpower and as a world power, that's not going to happen. If we leave the Middle East, that is a clear sign that we are losing major ground, and China is rising to meet and surpass us. I just don't see those trends happening very quickly. It could certainly happen, but I just don't see it happening in my lifetime, in the Middle East anyway. In East Asia, it may be different. I think we may see it.
Yeah, in my
Mhm.
in my estimation, if those bases are used to achieve regional stability, then the American empire is over. If they're used in order to continue the forever war, then the American empire still persists. The end of the American empire is when those bases are used to enforce regional stability, because there's no defense. It was always a way to ensure that the Middle East couldn't compete, and you protect the petrodollar. If those bases, get changed, then the US is a regional power, and that's what I think it looks like.
I mean, historically, when we see forever wars, it's a sign of a great power in disarray and in decline. So generally, when you are at your best and at your peak, you project power, similar to what we did with the Soviet Union. It rarely erupted into kinetic conflict, and it was usually by proxy. So I hope that
But America's had forever wars ever since its birth.
I mean, forever wars. I mean, if you consider, I mean, our new empire came about after World War II, right? So the Vietnam War,
Mm,
the Korean War doesn't even count. It's kind of like the continuation, kind of to settle World War II settlements, But I think that the forever war in our modern times, we had Vietnam, and we had Operation Iraqi Freedom and OEF Operation Enduring Freedom, and those
What
weren't
about the fake? What about the fake war on terror and the clean break memo? That wasn't forever war.
you mean you're talking about GWAT?
Yeah, just Libya, Sudan,
Yeah, of
Iraq,
course. I mean, that's part of the. Yeah, I
Afghanistan.
call that liberal hegemony, right? To kind of reshuffle the Middle East to our liking and create failed states for Israel. I mean, this is not like
Why they
that's
failed states for Israel when they help America?
it doesn't help America at all. That's where I
It does.
clearly it does not
Why?
at all.
But
So if that was the case, why would they need a Israel lobby to push for all these wars, right? If it was in our own interests, right? Because our thinkers and our strategists are
you got to
against these
get
wars.
out. You got to get out of U.S. works for the American people and the American people's interests. Once you can get that around your head, then you realize how the American empire benefits from war.
Yeah,
Because
you're not taking into account how state actors work, right? I'm not taking into consideration domestic issues. So a state actor like the Soviet Union can project great power, but its own citizens
they had a because they had a
could be
sovereign because
destitute, right? So
the USSR had a sovereign government. The government ruled. America doesn't have a sovereign government. It's ruled by lobby.
right. So you're making my point. Our Middle East policy is not to the best interest of the American
But
state
who are the
as a
lobbies?
nation
So
as a
who?
nation state, right? So it benefits Israel in this case. The
No,
lobby.
not Israel. Israel is a side benefit. Military contractors, technical contractors, financial contractors, rebuild contractors, ensuring no competition for the dollar, making sure that the petrodollar is preserved, ensuring that countries become subordinate in order to purchase bonds, lend them back. The US stock market kicks ass. It kicks ass from the Middle Eastern forever wars. To say that doesn't benefit America is a clear
But did you
misunderstanding
not see all the
of the
pushback
American
we got for
economy.
the Iraq War? We had to literally be duped into that, right? So there's a lot of pushback. You make it seem like it's just
Duped into
one.
it.
It's like someone writes an email and it happens, right? Hey, we're going here, we're going here. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of lobbying, and if there was not foreign interests at play,
From who? Who's the number one lobby? Who?
The Israel lobby is the
No.
number one lobby
That's the
that shapes our
14th.
foreign, not as
It's
far
the
as
14th lobby.
expenditure, not as far as expenditure, as far as actual implementation of policy. You could see it. Look at all these wars. Who's pushing for it? Is it the tobacco lobby? I don't see the NRA
Okay,
pushing. So
try
it's
try and
Netanyahu.
imagine
I-
try and imagine that Israel is the 51st state of America. Then it might help you figure it out.
but that's not the case. If it was the 51st state of America, it would have policies that would benefit the greater good. Here, it's only
No,
benefiting
no,
Israel.
no. America is not about the greater good. America is about stealing money from the American people and handing it over to the
No,
American
the
stock
greater good
market.
of the nation state of the United States. What we're doing is
No, no.
is
America's
declining our
not.
power.
America is the companies. It is the stock market.
Yeah.
It's not a nation state.
Yeah, it has a stock market because it is a hegemon. It is the ultimate nation state, and what we're doing
It's a
is
private
is
corporation that
causing a.
maximizes shareholder value.
You can say that about any government, right? You could break it down to those
No,
terms.
you can't. You can't say that for the Chinese government. That's the government rules China
You could easily they own a bunch of the shares that they got. That one guy came up and said 75% ownership. They're the ultimate version
by
of
the
that.
government.
Yeah.
The private shareholders own American
In
companies.
your definition, the Chinese even fit your definition even better. So if you can break them,
What do you mean, sorry?
by your definition of that, a corporation type setup, right? So that the Chinese government meets
No,
that.
Chinese
China meets that
is one
definition.
hundred percent
Yeah, it meets that definition
state
more.
controlled.
No,
No,
so
it's not a private corporation.
you're saying
The
the country is the whole market, right? Same in China. The industrial base, everything is controlled by the state. So
owned by
they
the
actually
government.
they
That's the
they
important part. Owned by the government.
but the government is the corporation, right? So but these are not,
What are you talking about?
the,
No, you've got it so that's so different.
if you talk
The
an
government the government is an entity that accepts money from private corporate interest. The private corporate interests dictate policy and set up NGOs and think tanks in order to put out research, and then hires Congress, hires Senate, and in deep state level bribes judiciary in order to push their shareholder value. Private interest, and it's paid for by the American people's debt, which is dumped upon the American people. That's completely different to China. It's the opposite of China.
but by your definition, they fall into the same category. But beyond that, the verbiage you use, I mean, it's not. This is not how international relations is looked at. Like if you were to have this conversation, let's say with Professor Pape, right? He would be giving you the same kind of pushback. Maybe not exactly the same way I do, but it's in academic international relation terms. You're hyper focused on the gears of the financial machine. You're super well versed in it, and overall, I agree. The industrialists and that class, the influence, they have certainly the big money influence, especially, the Black Rocks, the folks that Goldman Sachs, the Federal Reserve types, right? Those have undue power and they're not part of the system, right? So
Does war create GDP for America?
no, certainly those
Answer
are
it.
we talked about, but it's still insignificant in the whole picture, right? But back to what I was saying.
How is it insignificant?
But I'm trying to say that as a nation state, when you talk.
Do you not agree that the stock market is reaching new all time highs because of this war?
But these are all small pieces to a much bigger picture. But when you talk about international relations and state actors, right? Ultimately, a state actor acts in its own benefit. And the number one thing you try to avoid is military excursions and losses where you get stuck, right? These are wars we're getting into only by being duped into it, right? And our own generals say, hey, these are losing efforts. So we are pushing Israel's agenda. Netanyahu comes here, gives us his faulty Mossad intelligence, tries to sway our entire Congress. We give him a rolling red carpet entrance with standing ovations, right? If you don't see that, if you don't see Trump pulling out the chair for Netanyahu, that's unprecedented for a U.S. president to pull out a chair for a foreign leader. If you don't see the undue Israeli influence and that they're loyal to their tribe, right? You're not one of their tribe. The U.S. is
Thanks a
not
lot,
their tribe.
Cyrus.
So
Appreciate it.
that's kind of, I'll close there. Thanks, Sulima.
Cool, thank you. Simon, any last point you wanted to make before I wrap up?
No, we're done.
Appreciate it. Okay, guys, great conversations, great panel. Love it when Simon, Joa, Cyrus, and the rest of the crew, Andrew, obviously, Andy as well, are here. Much love to all of you. Great, but guys, your boy's so tired of 7 interviews. We've got 3 great interviews lined up tomorrow. We got Colonel Lawrence Wilkinson. Very first time we're having him on, so that'll be awesome. So that's going to be super exciting. We got Anthony Aguilera again. He's awesome. And we got Fiona something Diamond. She got arrested by the UK police for speaking about the Holocaust because apparently, I didn't know this, but it's illegal in the UK now. News to all of us. So all 3 of those interviews are going to be tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to start a little bit later. We're going to start at 2:30 p.m. Eastern.
So watch out for that. There's a tweet in the nest. It is David Icke's interview. Check it out. It's gonna go live. Well, it's going live now. And check it out. It's awesome interview. The tweet's in the nest. It's pinned in the YouTube. I'll be there chatting as well. And then after that, the interview that goes live is the one we did with Professor Fawad Zadi, and then after that is with Dr. Atusa, the one who was on the Spaces with us. She was talking about the what's the virus called again? Hantavirus? I think it's the hantavirus.
Hunter
Yeah,
virus.
hantavirus. Is it gonna take us out? Oh my God! Check that interview out. You never know what's gonna go down, guys. Tweet is in